Tonight, we stay with the shoreline after everyone goes home. The boardwalk exhales, gulls fall silent, the flats shine like a road you shouldn't follow. First, a kid who sees lights where boats never anchor. Then a white chair that refuses to sleep. Finally, a bottle and the Whitecaps that write back. Before we start, 3 soft checks. Slow breath in, loosen your jaw and thumb on the table. Click the quiet key. Leave your city and local time in the comments, plus what you're listening on. Let's let our little night map circle the world. New, calm history horror arrives most nights. If this keeps you company, wait until the video ends to subscribe. Tap the bell so the next file finds you. Afterward, tell me which detail stayed under your skin. Ready? Let's begin. He clocks out late and the boardwalk exhales. Shutters click and hold. Neon hums once and chooses silence. Far past the lifeguard buoys, the harbour mouth draws a black line as if the night took a ruler to the sea. Moonlight lays a pale road across the flats, and the low tide shows its bones in long, ribbed bands that shine like wet slate. Marcus walks with his shoes looped by their laces, salt still drying in his hair from the afternoon shift, pockets heavy with quarters he forgot to drop in the tip jar. He likes numbers that behave and coastlines that don't. One steadies him, the other keeps him awake. He means only to breathe for a minute, to let the smell of fryer oil leave his shirt and the chalk dust sugar lift off his wrists. He likes the chain of small sounds at closing hour. 1 door latch, 1 gull, 1 late bus. Each noise spaced so neatly a person can think inside the quiet. Beside the snack bar, the last trash bin thunks shut, and a raccoon considers the lid and gives up, dignity intact. Out at the edge of town, a porch light winks because someone is testing the bulb and doesn't know anyone is watching. The world is a tidy ledger. What happened, what didn't, what can be safely put away. Then he notices the bar. It's out farther than he has ever seen it, an exposed spine with shoulders and narrowings that make sense if you squint and picture an animal sleeping on its side. The sand there is not soft. You can tell by the color and by the way it holds the light, hard pack with a crust that keeps your heel from sinking. Low tide gets people in trouble for this exact reason. It promises a floor where there is only a pause. He tells himself that again, the way he has heard the old guard say it, like a rule you should pin to your sleeve. He tells himself and steps down anyway. The flats hiss as air slips through the sand. Foam eyes blink and burst at his toes. A strand of eelgrass disputes him and then agrees, flattening as if pushed by an invisible hand. He walks past the first pool with baby shrimp that scatter all at once like a thought blown out, and he chooses the line he knows from daylight. A ridge, then a drift, then a hard shoulder wide as a sidewalk, then the place where footing begins to think about being water. He breathes evenly and hears the small, steady things. A buoy bell working the same sentence it always works. The thin skitter of sand as it moves 6 inches and decides it has gone far enough. His own pocket quarters answering his step, like a metronome he forgot to turn off. He would have kept his plan, breathe, turn home, but a different light meets him past the buoys. 3 of them, in a neat line, white as the mouth of a shell. Not stars, they sit too low, not a boat, boats rock, and these hold their level like they were pinned to glass. They blink left to right and then right to left, slow, patient, like a person practicing a code they learned from a book. The line they keep is outside the channel, on the wrong side of the markers. No one goes out there at low tide unless they want their name in a story people tell with palms up and eyebrows raised. He gives himself practical answers because practical answers fix most nights. Divers with lamps, rehearsing a signal for fun. A drone set, though the glow feels warmer than the cart white the hobby kids fly. Maybe a prank. The summer kids get bored when the fair leaves. He raises his hand to shade his eyes, and the three lights dip together as if nodding back. It isn't a mirror. He can feel the beat of delay. It is a reply. He laughs once, just to test whether the sound feels normal in the air. It does, and yet the laugh sits wrong in his throat, like a word you said out of order and can't quite make right. He turns to check his line to shore, the smart check, the check you're proud of later. And the town looks innocent, a necklace of bulbs with one wink out where the bait shop refuses to replace a string no one complains about. The snack bar windows are squared up like tired eyes. The lifeguard stand is empty, high and white, with the gull on its roof, doing the thing birds do before weather, head down, body level, still enough to make a person feel loud just by existing. He turns back to the lights and they are closer. Not the way a boat closes with a jog and a push. They are simply nearer, as if the sea has learned how to slide something along a seam you cannot see. He steps forward for a better view and discovers the first trick of the bar. The surface looks even, the way a perfect cake looks even, but under the frosting it rises and falls. In one place the sand is so hard a heel won't mark it. 2 steps over, it is pudding. He tests with his toe and finds the line like he is reading Braille with his foot, the firm thread he can follow without thinking. The lights wait. They feel patient. They do not push or lure. They keep their row as if they too expect him to double-check the math. He tries to read the day's tide chart in his head. 6:22 low, he thinks. It's past that now. The sea is already turning under him, wearing a new face while it keeps the old one on for a minute more. He thinks about contour lines, the paper kind and the sand kind. He has seen the taped chart inside the snack bar door too many times not to remember the chapbook of curls that mean shelf and drop and place where waves like to change their minds. He frowns at the line the lights sit on and decides, like a person deciding between 2 doors, to go one more step and then stop. That is when the figure stands up at the far edge of the bar and turns the evening into the sort of night that puts a small stone on your memory and tells it to stay. It is waist deep in nothing, hair laid flat the way hair gets when the ocean has been combing it for a long time. It stands on the bright cut where the bar meets the first dish of deeper water, and the 3 lights move behind it like obedient moths. Marcus feels no shove of wind, no sudden cold, no comic book signal the movies taught everyone to expect. What he feels is taste, the hemp bite of old rope and a medicine cabinet mint someone forgot uncapped 50 years ago. A picture arrives with the taste, strong as if he had watched it, even though he was not alive to see it. A storm in 54, a wooden dory half full, a father's hands burning on a line, and then the small, fatal mercy of letting go, because the body knows when fire beats grip. He swallows and the picture stays. The figure does not sink. The sea does not make little fits around its waist, the way water does when you wade. It stands like a person on a porch step, comfortable with what bears it. He tries to inventory what else is wrong, to make the wrongness small enough to handle. The sound is normal. Far bell, soft chop, a bus brake, the sigh of a wave deciding it prefers not to crash. The look is the single wrong thing. The smell is a second wrong thing. If he admits it, the clean cold you get after a thunderhead when the whole beach smells freshly scrubbed and the shells look polished. That smell sits inside a night that promised only salt and oil and hot dog steam. The figure lifts an arm, long, even, no rush. The three lights trace the same path an instant later, drawing a letter in the dark the way a teacher writes slow for a student who will only understand if it is written exactly. Marcus does not know semaphore, but the shape lands anyway, because the body knows what command looks like when rescue is near it. He feels the words without translation. Go back. He tests the order because that is the sort of man he is. He steps forward half a foot, and the bar sighs beneath him and goes soft like bread, soaked too long. He steps backward the same distance, and the ground firms under his heel, as if a hand packed the sand from below. The instruction is simple. The argument in his head is loud. He tries to think like a map. He tries to remember where the ditch begins and where the edge curls, and how a person's weight persuades one kind of sand faster than another. He tells himself to breathe slowly through his nose until numbers, not feelings, are what he is thinking with. Behind him, the gull leaves the stand without a sound, which is its own kind of voice. It draws a clean line toward town and keeps going inland where light is certain. He watches it go and then watches the figure, and the figure waits. That waiting is the oddest mercy in the night, the sense that something has all the time it needs and is willing to spend it, so he will spend his the right way. He does not speak, because speaking would turn the moment into a story, and he is not ready for it to be a story yet. He wants it to stay instruction until his feet are safe. He retreats one careful step, and then another. The bar's texture changes beneath him the way a road changes from gravel to tar, a flip you can feel in your calves. He tests with his toe and finds the pudding line a foot in front of him like a dark thought he will not press on. He sets his jaw and continues, spine level, chin even, eyes on the paced dark place where the bottom falls away, and pretends it is sky. He does not look down. He does not look back to town. He does not think about the figure except to hold the idea of the raised arm like a compass he cannot see, but can obey. The town grows larger without getting louder. Sound seems to be waiting politely off stage for him to finish. His soles take the last of the firm, and then the honest wet of flat beach, and his legs, now allowed, shake the way a dog shakes. Quick, thorough, pleased to be done with something it did not enjoy. Out on the bar, the three lights roll backward on an invisible rail, keeping their clean line. The figure thins the way breath thins on cold glass, and then the water chooses its ordinary voice and carries on with the night, as if nothing happened. He stands in dry sand and counts his quarters, not to measure money, but to prove to himself his mind still adds. 25, 50, 75, 1, and on, getting the total right twice in a row so the system feels intact. A breeze combs the flats and smooths them like a giant palm, wanting the whole scene neat before morning. The pale road of moonlight dulls as a thin cloud slips across, and regular life puts its hand back on the room. A couple laughing down the boardwalk, the soft clink of bottles in a distant crate, the late bus finishing its route with a yawn of brakes. He tells no one. Not the night guard who would believe the tides before he believed a kid. Not the girl at the coin pusher who likes unlikely stories when they are about other states. He walks home with his shoes in his hand and sand drying on his ankles in small fans that flake at each step, and the rule he always knew, low tide is not safe, feels less like a posted sign and more like a sentence someone said straight to him and then waited to see if he would do it. He dreams of nothing he remembers and wakes with old rope taste in his mouth, clean hemp and salt, the way a memory leaves a flavor and then makes you chase the picture it belongs to. He rides his bike to work early and opens the snack bar in a mood that makes the coffee taste honest. The tide chart taped inside the door gets a longer look than usual. He reads the lines and thinks about the moving floor and the quiet hand that told him where it would fail. He checks the morning's low and the evening's low and marks both with a thumbnail dent only he will notice. All day the numbers in the till behave, and the orders come as if the town decided together to ask for simple things. He stays calm, and the calm becomes a place he can stand. That night he returns to the edge because people go back to doorways they didn't walk through when the knob turned on its own. He stops sooner this time, at the rack line where the sea leaves notes in eelgrass loops and smooth sticks with one end chewed and crab shells set down like little masks. He waits without deciding whether he is waiting for lights. The ocean keeps its privacy, which feels right. Not everything repeats just because you hope it will or dread it might. He breathes into the air that lives between the night and the water and lets the sounds balance. A buoy bell counting like an old friend, a thin hiss as the last of the low pulls its skirt and lets it drop again. His own breath steadying the way a person fogs a window to write one short message and then wipes it away before anyone else can read. When he locks up after close, he prints a small sign and tapes it inside the snack bar door where only staff will see. Low tide safe, bar moves, count your steps. He doesn't write who said so. He doesn't have a name for what stood there. He only has the feeling of a hand he never held, telling him to go back in time, to live. He straightens the tape, presses each corner, and leaves the room how he found it, clean, simple, ready for whoever comes at opening. And out beyond the buoys, where the dark keeps its tidiness, 3 lights keep a distance that looks like nothing and feels like care. On Sunday, the fog comes in like someone closing careful curtains. It is the good kind, the kind with soft edges that make people whisper without knowing why. The gulls land and stay landed. The beach town steps 1/2 pace slower and likes itself better for it. Marcus opens the snack bar to a line of patient faces and small orders. He moves like someone doing a gentle dance with a partner who lets you lead, and the work stays square in his hands. The sign inside the door looks plain enough to ignore. He doesn't mind if everyone ignores it. It's for him. Near closing, when the last of the kites come down and the sand rakes do their smooth, repeating furrows, he sees the harbour patrol truck pause by the jetty, lights off, engine polite. 2 officers step out and look at the water the way carpenters look at a beam, respectful, measuring, expecting the material to do what it tends to do, unless someone was foolish with weight. He doesn't go over. He doesn't want to be the kid with the glow in his face who tells grown men where the bottom is. He keeps sweeping until the broom's bristles tickle the mat and make the small scratching noise he finds satisfying. A woman with a stroller buys a water and asks what time low tide happens tonight. He tells her, and then he hears himself add, "The bar is farther out this week. It shifts. Stay high." The tone is too flat to be a warning. It sounds like commentary, a weather line, neutral and easy to accept. The woman nods and says her boy likes the shine on the flats, and he nods like a man who has also liked that shine and will continue to like it, even if some part of him has learned to look at the edges. She goes, and he watches how she keeps her feet in the parts of the sand that remember the day's heat. People know more than they say. He is learning to trust that. After close, he walks the line again. The fog looks heavier near the channel, the way dark does when it stacks itself. He stops at the rack line, the place he promised himself would be far enough, and he waits with no story to force. The ocean, which is good at its job, goes on doing its job. 30 yards right, a man with a metal detector hums little notes to keep himself company, and the machine hums big notes to agree. Far left, a teenager is brave on a skimboard until the board decides a different physics and flips him into laughter. The night is made of equal parts ordinary and watchful. He almost goes home, and then the lights arrive, not dramatic, not in a rush, just in their row. 3 white, warm as shell mouths, beyond the buoys in the same line he remembers, and did not trust himself to have remembered precisely. They blink, left to right and right to left, and he breathes through the small quake that happens in the ribs when something you witnessed shows itself again the exact way it did before. He finds his toes have slid forward into the first shine of the flats. He stops them. He keeps his heels on the darker sand. He feels, for the first time clearly, that the test tonight is not of footing. It is of attention. "Okay," he says into his sleeve, because speaking toward his own chest makes the tone stay small. "Okay." He wants to wave and does not. He wants to step down and does not. He wants to do all the wrong things kindly, and he chooses none of them. The lights hold their place the way patient people can hold their place, while a younger person decides whether to honor the lesson or turn it into entertainment. A shuffle sound behind him. Old Mr. Conti from the bait shop, moving like a coat on a hanger, hands in pockets heavy with things you don't sell but like to carry. "You see that?" Conti asks the air, as if he and the air are in the same stage play and Marcus is backstage eavesdropping. Marcus answers like a man who has been thinking about how much to say before he ever had anyone to say it to. "3, he says. "You ever see 3 like that?" Conti's mouth makes a shape that might be a smile if you had known him long enough. "I seen 3 like that when the Thalia went sideways on a bar in 54. I was a baby. Father told the same story every holiday, so now it feels like I saw it with my own eyes." He rocks, listening to his pockets. "He said a man stood up where no man should stand and told him to get his fool self home. He said the sea tells you when it wants you, and it tells you when it doesn't. People mix those up." "Who was the man?" Marcus asks, even though he can taste the answer in the old rope flavor that still visits sometimes like weather. "Father thought it was his father," Conti says, and lets that sit, the way you let a dish rest before you carve it. "I think it was his fear dressed up as help. Either way, got him home. That's help enough." The lights blink a little quicker, then slow. Marcus feels like a student whose teacher has seen him grasp something small but true. "I'm not walking out," he says to the row. "I get it." He doesn't know why he says it aloud, except that speaking turns thought into action, the way writing turns air into something the hand can carry. The lights steady, the fog around them thins for a breath, and then remembers itself and closes again. "Your mother keep you?" Conti asks, a question from another subject that belongs to this one anyway, because the topic is care and the different shapes it takes. "Mostly," Marcus says. "Father walked, not angry, just done. She says some people are like tides. They leave in a way that feels natural until you count how much they took." He keeps his voice plain so the sentence can land without wobbling. Conti nods, as if that is a tide chart he recognizes. He takes a marble from his pocket, the old kind that looks like it has a cat's eye asleep inside, and he gives it to Marcus without explanation. "For your pocket," he says. "So when you find you're counting again, you can give yourself a better object." He shuffles down beach to talk to the detector man about the price of lost pull tabs. Marcus stands with the marble in his right hand and the quarters in his left and decides both are true. You can count the world, and you can hold it without counting. The lights do not require anything from him tonight. They ask only that he remember the one thing they have already told him. He thinks about unnecessary second lessons and how many problems would stay small if people honored first ones like they mattered. He says, "Thank you," in a voice light enough to float, and the row answers with a single, gentle blink that does not work like electricity. He goes home along the high path and passes the new rentals whose porch lights have that even, unsentimental glow that makes every house look like a showroom after hours. In his own kitchen, where the bulb is a little warmer and the paint is a little chipped, he puts the marble in the bowl where he drops keys and receipts. He writes nothing down. He doesn't want to trap the night on paper and make it behave like a story he could tell. He wants it to keep being the thing he consults privately when a choice looks simple and is not. Monday brings wind. The flats chop white in small, busy triangles, and the gulls quarrel like neighbors with thin walls. The sign inside the snack bar door curls a corner, and he straightens it with a thumb and trusts that small act to tune something he can't name. Late in the day, a patrol comes in with faces like men who searched too far north last week. They ask him where the bottom drops if you start at the last jetty, and favour the right side because left looks friendlier and is lying. He shows them with the chart and with his hand, and they nod the same way you nod when a stranger's directions match the map you already carry in your head. That night, a tourist, bright shoes, careful grin, asks whether the sandbar is walkable. Marcus points at the moon instead, which is a better answer. "It pulls," he says. "It also pushes back." The tourist laughs in a way that says he will stay high because he would rather tell a different story later. People rescue themselves with the smallest sentences. He closes, sweeps, counts and locks, and his body feels like a well-kept book, worn at the corners, no pages missing. He takes the high path again and stops at the rack line without meaning to, which means the habit is beginning to keep him safer than intention ever did. The fog is gone, the stars are plentiful, the three lights do not come. The ocean, given an evening off from apparitions, proves that its ordinary face is sufficient. He stands there until the air makes him yawn, and he heads home with a sense that the lesson is not finished because lessons about water are never finished. They are only paused where a human can rest. In the morning he wakes thinking about how people inherit memory. Some inherit photos, some inherit money. Some inherit a caution that isn't exactly fear. A care that arrived inside the family, like a bowl you keep washing even after the set it belonged to broke. He thinks about Conti's father and the Thalia, and he thinks about a figure on a bar, telling a different boy the best two-word order a life can receive. He imagines how many times those two words have saved people, spoken in kitchens and engine rooms and on porches with paper cups. He imagines how many times people have mistaken "go back" for "you can't," and walked forward in anger when retreat would have bought them a future. He writes another sign and does not tape this one to a door. He folds it into his pocket and carries it all day like the marble. When you feel proof, check it gently. When you feel pull, count your steps. When you feel seen, say thank you. He never takes it out. He doesn't need to. The weight is enough to change his stance. At dusk, the patrol truck stops by the snack bar, and one of the officers, newer, hair still uncertain about the ocean, asks if he knows a Marcus who walks the flats. Marcus says he might. The officer says, "Thanks for the line. We shifted the search last week because of what you said. We pulled a kid out, hypothermic but breathing. Might have gone different the other way." He says it simply, hands at rest, no hero talk, the way professionals speak when the job nearly did its job the easy way and then decided to be difficult. Marcus nods and says he's glad. He doesn't say anything about lights. He doesn't mention a figure. He lets the officer take the credit he can take and keep the rest floating where it belongs. The officer looks past him to the door, where the plain sign sits square and stubborn. "That yours?" he asks. "Feels right." Marcus says it is. The officer reads it once more and leaves a pause, then says, "Sometimes the sea sends a heads up." And he gives the sort of shrug you give when you're not supposed to believe in something and you do anyway because it keeps working. That night, clouds move in from a direction the weather app didn't promise. The air tastes like rain and then changes its mind and stays dry. Marcus walks the High Line and sees nothing he could not explain to a child who likes facts. Shells, sticks, deliberate footprints that look like someone practicing to be careful. He smiles at that because practicing to be careful is exactly the right kind of practice to waste on a pleasant night. He goes home at a decent hour and sleeps the kind of sleep that costs nothing and buys you an entire next day. Fog sits low like someone pulled a blanket to the chin of the sea. Streetlights turn the mist to soft cones. The boardwalk does its end-of-day throat clears. 2 carts rolling home, a latch, a broom tapping wood. Marcus finishes the sweep, snaps the padlock, and lets the small keys drop to their pocket place. He's not planning to walk the flats tonight. He's planning to go home, rinse salt from his wrists, and sleep at a decent hour. Plans make a good shape to start from. Nights don't always stay in shape. The first odd thing is a voice carried wrong. Voices travel over water farther than they do on land. Everyone local knows that. But this one comes bent, thin, as if pulled through a straw, as if the throat on the other end is surprised to be working. "Hey!" And then the word loses itself. Marcus pauses at the top step and tries to pretend he did not hear it. He gives the town a full minute to supply a better source, a TV, a porch, a phone call set to speaker. The minute passes, the fog holds its curtain. He walks the high path and stops at the rack line, the place he promised himself would be far enough. He keeps his shoes on as if that promise will hold better if leather stands between him and the first shine. He listens until listening becomes a kind of seeing. The buoy bell keeps the same patient sentence. Small waves stitch and unstitch the same edge. Far off, a generator hums behind a shuttered arcade. The voice does not repeat. That would be too easy. Instead, the fog makes a wrong shape near the channel, a darker dark with a low light inside it, like a lantern smothered by a coat, then lifted, then smothered again. Marcus thinks about the patrol. He thinks about calling. He thinks about how slow time can be while you wait for help and how quickly water makes its choices. He decides to move parallel to the waterline, not down it. He is not walking out. He is walking along. Language matters. He stays where the sand remembers the day's heat. His heels leave honest prints. He stops when the low light blinks 3 times at an even tempo, then drifts a body length, then blinks again, left to right to left, patient as a teacher with a thick chalk. The shape inside the fog separates. A boy's head, the wide white of a scared face, 2 arms that do not belong to a swimmer. They belong to someone trying not to be lost. The tide is making its slow turn, the way a person rolls in sleep. The bar out there is becoming not a bar again, piece by piece, cell by cell. The boy stands where a person can stand. 20 feet in either direction, the floor erases itself and remembers that it is water. "Hey!" Marcus calls, keeping his voice even, the way you speak to a dog near traffic or a child near a curb. Even voices make better bridges. "Don't move! Look here!" He lifts one arm the way the figure lifted an arm for him. The fog takes his words and folds them in cotton, but the boy's head snaps his way. Eyes find eyes across a space that has decided to be unkind. Meanwhile, 3 white lights form their row beyond the buoys. They are farther back than last week, as if they decided to be more formal now that the stakes are obvious. They blink left to right, then right to left, and then they hold. The line they keep is not decoration, It traces the one safe seam a human foot could follow if a human foot had to. Marcus feels that understanding arrive in the body first, then in the mind, the way a person knows where a railing will be before the hand finds it. He takes 3 steps back without losing the boy's gaze. He keeps his heels in the warm sand. He lifts both arms now and moves them in a slow, even pull. Come to me, but only where my hands are pointing. The boy mirrors without moving his feet, an instinct older than language. Good. Mirroring is a form of trust. Marcus shouts toward the lifeguard stand, toward town, toward any ear that will take a job. Help! He does not fill it with extra words. Short helps travel faster. A door opens on the boardwalk. A porch light lifts. A figure becomes 2. He hears the patrol truck's engine come to polite life near the jetty. He rounds his voice back to the boy. Name! A beat. Then, Cal! Sharp, like a bark. Cal, Marcus says to put a handle on the night. Look at me. I'm Marcus. Keep your toes where they are. What's around your feet? Water, Cal says, with a grin that's almost a sob, as if he has finally found something everyone will agree on. Feels like it wants my ankles. It does, Marcus says, but not where I'm drawing. Watch my hands. He gives the boy a heave motion and a stop motion, like a conductor who has learned to show the measure in a way that makes the worst musician still play inside it. He steps right. He steps back. He tests each patch of sand with his toe, the way he taught himself to do in daylight. He matches the ghost row. The row, in turn, keeps him honest. The patrol truck's lights do not flash. They do not want to blind anyone into a mistake. 2 officers come with throw bags and a long aluminum pole. Conti appears from nowhere, as bait shop owners do, as if the sea owns a bell. Only they can hear when someone needs hands that remember old knots. A tourist with bright shoes arrives on a panting run and stops when the officers lift open hands. Stay. Cal does not see any of this. Cal watches Marcus. He nods when Marcus nods. He waits when Marcus waits. He keeps his toes married to the bar the way scared feet do when they finally understand what part of the floor is real. Okay, Cal, Marcus says, when his own feet find the last of the hard. Okay, 1 step with me, then freeze. We're going to slide sideways. We're going to take the long line that stays honest. You don't have to hurry. You just have to copy me. He raises one hand high and sets it down in a slow metronome. Cal lifts his hand and sets it down. The sea answers with a soft sigh that a person who did not know the language would call a wave. Marcus hears it for what it is. Approval, or at least agreement not to interfere. The first officer feeds the throwbag line into the surf line like a tailor laying thread on a hem. The second officer keeps the long pole ready to turn into a lever. Conti stands where the last step to flat land will be, and makes a shape with his body old men make all over the world when they ask waves to remember manners. The bright shoe tourist holds still like a person trying to let the air keep its balance. The 3 white lights ease backward a yard, as if to demonstrate that backing away is a kind of help. Marcus marks their new stance and stops Cal with a palm. Freeze, he says, not loud, not soft, just the way a doctor says the word when a hand is near a flame. Cal freezes and heaves 2 breaths and visibly wins his private fight not to cry. Privately losing would be allowed. It's that kind of night. Winning will make the next part simpler. Last bit, Marcus says. The floor is going to pretend to be soft where it looks friendly. We're going to ignore friendly and follow honest. Watch my shoes. Match them. I'm not going to touch you yet. I will if I have to. Cal nods once and licks salt from his mouth and does the most valuable thing a person can do in bad water. He keeps obeying calm. They move, an inching sideways that looks like nothing from town, And is the whole world down here? The fog presses and lifts and presses again. The bar sighs in places and behaves in others. The row of lights does not show off. It keeps a straight homework line for 2 students and feels, in its restraint, like the best teacher anyone ever had. Now, Marcus says, one word, when the floor firms and the throwbag line becomes a possible brace. Cal steps into the truth like someone stepping through a door that has finally decided not to slam. The first officer feeds out a loop. The second puts the long pole at the line where the bar likes to turn mean. Cal touches the line with his wrist. Marcus says, "Okay." The officer says, "Okay." The sea says nothing, which is also okay. The last 3 steps pass all at once. Cal stumbles in the way people stumble when fear has been carrying muscle for too long and suddenly sets it down. Conti's hand, without flourish, finds a shoulder and becomes a wall. The officers wrap the throwbag line loosely around the boy's torso as if tying a ribbon on a present they are not willing to keep. Marcus's shoes find flat, wet beach, and his legs shake a little and then quit, faithful to their habit. The row of lights backs away a final time. It keeps a gentleman's distance and, with a small, shared blink, disappears the way porch lights go off in a neighborhood where everyone has decided at the same moment to go to bed. Cal's teeth chatter. Not showy, honest. The kind that can tip into silence if the body grabs the wrong dial. The officers move fast and correct. Blanket, cuffs off, pockets emptied, questions later. The tourist with bright shoes takes off his hoodie without being asked and puts it in hands that know what to do with it. He looks at Marcus with a look a person gives a stranger when the stranger has become part of their life by accident, indebted, embarrassed by indebtedness, trying to fix the face so it won't leak. Marcus nods once, the way men nod in parking lots after simple jobs that were not simple and are done. "Name?" An officer asks Cal again because the first time was fog. "Cal," the boy says, with enough voice to place himself in the world. "My mum's at the motel. She thought I was in the lobby. I went out because it was pretty." He doesn't apologize. He doesn't need to. The night drew a shape and he walked into it. That is a thing human beings do. "We'll go get her," the officer says. "We'll tell her you were smart and did what you were told. That part is true." Conti grunts agreement because praise, put on to the right detail, is a tool worth keeping sharp. Marcus stands a few feet back so the scene can become official. He puts his hands on his knees, then straightens because he does not want to look like a man who is done. He is not done. He is listening for the last note. The sea returns to its ordinary voice, the one that pretends nothing happened and is usually right. Fog slackens, streetlights grow taller, the town breathes in and gets on with itself. "Kid," Conti says, turning his face half toward Marcus, but not enough to make it performative. "That line you walked the boy on? Father would have called it the old Thalia seam." He rolls the marble in his pocket. Funny how seams outlast names, outlast boats, outlast us. His tone holds no mysticism, only inventory. Marcus hears it and feels the ledger of the night balance. What was given, what was kept, what was watched, what was let go. The patrol truck idles like a steady heart. The blanket makes a small cave of warmth for the boy. The bright shoe tourist, whose hoodie now works as a pillow under Cal's knees, walks 2 steps away and stares at the place in the fog where 3 lights used to be. He puts his hands in his pockets and takes them out, and puts them back in. He looks like a man learning that fear and gratitude live in the same room. Marcus looks out once, long enough to confirm that the bar is smoothing into one featureless shine. There is no figure. There is nothing to point at tomorrow. Good. Proof would cheapen it. He turns inland and, with slow feet, carries himself toward the boardwalk bulbs, which blush from yellow to white, like they're pleased to be of use again. He does not feel heroic, he feels useful. Useful is quieter, useful stays. Back at the snack bar door, he checks the tape on the sign. Low tide, safe, bar moves, count your steps. He adds, with a pen he keeps tucked behind a meter, a fourth line small enough not to shout, listen when the water asks. He locks up again because rituals heal what phrase. He pushes the keys into his pocket and lets the quarters lie where they always lie. He walks home and does not try to talk to anyone about what he saw, because the story would be wrong in a mouth that needs to sleep. When he finally lies down, he does not dream of rope. He dreams of a hand, palm up, saying nothing at all, and meaning go back until morning makes the word mean be here. Years do what years do, they turn. The snack bar changes ownership twice. The new paint peels in long, honest curls like the old paint did. The bait shop sign fades to a kinder blue. The gulls teach new gulls where to stand to look like statues. The patrol gets a different truck. The ocean stays at work, taking small bites out of the jetty and returning small gifts with the good manners of something that understands exchange. People come, people go. Marcus stays within walking distance of the water. He is not a lifeguard. He thought about it, ran the forms, studied the pay, listened to his knees and chose to keep them. He does the sort of work that keeps a beach town working, stock in the morning, repairs at noon, snack bar lines at dusk when someone calls in. He volunteers for the night festival every October, the one where kids carry paper lanterns shaped like fish. He answers, when asked about the water by visitors, in sentences short enough to become truths. He never says the words lights or figure. He says tide, bottom, seam, shelf. Everyday language lives longer in other people's mouths. On a clear shoulder season morning, he meets Cal again. He does not recognize him at first. The boy became a young man, and the blanket at the truck became a jacket with a patch that says Ocean Tech. Cal recognizes Marcus because the mind tags the person it used to stare at when panic was a wall and the person was a door. They shake hands in the quiet way decent men approve, a 2-second acknowledgement of a longer thing. I work in hydrology now, Cal says, pushing hair from his eyes that the ocean has tried to keep. Rivers, mostly, some coastal stuff. I tell people where the bottom turns on them. I try to do it before they're standing on it. He says it lightly, because lightness keeps shame from falsely attaching itself to luck. You came back, Marcus says, a sentence that means more than it says. Cal nods and points at the bar, today a suggestion more than a feature, and gives it a look like a man looking at a teacher's house from the sidewalk, grateful, shy, a little wary of knocking. They walk the high line and let the conversation use the same pacing the sea uses. A subject, a pause, a return, a small correction, a longer beat. Cal says he tells his students, he has students now, that water writes notes you can read if you stop asking for letters and start watching strokes. He teaches them to feel for the firm line with their toes without lifting feet. He teaches them to say, go back to themselves and to strangers with the tone that leaves room for dignity. He does not tell them about 3 white lights. He thinks about telling Marcus. He decides he doesn't need to. Marcus tells Cal about Conti's marble and how it lives in a bowl with dull keys and receipts, and how sometimes he puts it in his pocket on days when counting would be a way to make fear feel like a plan. He tells him about the sign inside the snack bar door and how the words have been replaced 3 times by managers who thought the ink was old, not the advice. He doesn't mention the night rescue unless Cal wants to. Cal does not. Some scenes keep their shape by not being retold. Meanwhile, in the background of these years, other lives cross the same seam and make their own small ledgers. A mother pulls a toddler back by the elbow and says later, casually, that she just had a feeling. A retired deckhand pauses on the wet line and stares at the bar as if he is reading names. A pair of newlyweds stand hand in water to their ankles and, without knowing why, step back together one pace at the same time. Twins on a tide chart neither has seen. On a late September evening, the festival begins. Paper fish swing on dowels and little LED candles make warm mouths in the wind. A band plays the kind of surf guitar that sounds best when heard through fabric. People talk softer when the lanterns pass. Light does that to humans in every culture that ever lived. Marcus mans the cider table. He keeps cinnamon sticks stacked like a neat fence. He smiles at kids who want to choose the ladle. He nods at parents who tilt their cups to show enough, but not too much. The water looks busy but good. The sand prints hold. The patrol walks a slow arc with no hurry inside it. An old man, Conti, older now, smaller now, sits on a folding chair facing the bar. He has the marble in his pocket and a soft cap that was his father's. He does not stand, he doesn't need to. The sea knows he is present. Then the wind shifts. Not a big drama, not a squall. The kind of quarter turn that means everything to a seam and nothing to a person who is not trained to notice. The band breaks for water. The lanterns eddy. A teenager, barefoot, in that stage, between child and adult where authority is a suggestion, runs ahead of a girl with a carp lantern and steps onto the first shine because it glistens like a stage. He thinks he is still on stage when the floor under that stage loosens. "Hey!" Marcus says, one word that holds four. Stop. Look. Listen. Back. Because years of saying fewer words have made one word capable of carrying weight. The boy hears him and startles and freezes, and because freezing is better than a flail when the floor pretends to be polite, the night does not immediately bite. The patrol sees the bite about to happen and moves. Cal is closer. He does not calculate the optics of running. He runs. Marcus does not step down. He takes the long arc that keeps him on honest ground and puts himself where his hands can serve as a fence. Cal takes the blocking position that teachers take on pool decks when a lane needs to learn what a boundary feels like. The patrol officer with the long pole arrives with the long pole, which looks ridiculous until it is the literal difference between a bad story and a story redeemed mid-sentence. The boy, who will later become a man who tells his kids that the sea forgave him once, breathes wrong twice, and then breathes right because 3 adults breathe right in front of him, and breathing is a language people copy without knowing they are fluent. The lanterns collect behind the cider table the way birds collect on a wire when weather sends an email. The band, seeing that this is not a show, becomes quiet without being told. Conti lifts one hand, not to signal, just to make the scene one hand more present. The bar, perhaps out of pride, pretends to be solid for one last half-minute. The boy walks back from its pretense to the honest wet with his dignity intact, because nobody made a theatre out of him. He returns the carp lantern to the girl, who did not scream, and the girl looks at him like a person who will be his friend later. It is a good night in the ledger. Small, but with interest. After, farther down the beach, Marcus and Cal stand where the rack line draws its new, neat curve. They do not talk about heroics, they talk about pressure systems and how a northern bend on a lazy evening can put teeth under a rug. They talk about the way a town learns by repetition and how repetition only works if no one gets bored of saying the same true thing. They talk about signs and the size of the font and how a sentence short enough will survive managers. Cal says, "I looked for the lights for a year after that night." He says it like someone confessing a juvenile habit, then not exactly like a confession, because there is no guilt in it. Never saw them again. Marcus says. I did once. Not for me. For a boy named Cal. He keeps his eyes on the bar so the sentence can land without faces interfering. Cal laughs once, the kind that empties the chest and resets the shoulders. Conti comes up slow and tucks his cap back from his forehead and says to both of them, "You boys keep telling people what's under their feet. Boats come and go, bars too. Advice is what lasts." He taps the marble in his pocket like a conductor tapping a baton on a music stand. "And if you ever see 3 lights in a row, don't stand there making poetry. Wave your arms the way the old man did. That's the language everybody learns without school." The lantern parade ends. Parents carry sleeping kids in the shape every parent's body remembers. The cider runs out at the exact right moment. The patrol truck circles once and parks. The wind shifts back to friendly. The bar looks innocent. Innocence is not the same as safety, and everyone in hearing distance has, for tonight, learned that distinction. Years later, because years later always comes, the snack bar gets another owner. The sign inside the door disappears during a new Manager Zeal Day. Marcus lets it go for 3 mornings. On the 4th, he prints it fresh and tapes it in the same place and steps back. Low tide safe, bar moves, count your steps, he adds, smaller but not shy. Listen when the water asks. No one argues, no one applauds. It's just ink on plastic, on tape on paint. Little layers add up. That is one of the ways towns survive. A final evening arrives, the kind people call perfect in postcards. The flats shine, the wind behaves, the horizon does the line a child draws when a teacher says see. Marcus walks alone with his shoes by their laces. He stops at the rack line. He stays there. He has spent years practicing staying. He looks to the seam. Nothing asks. Good, he doesn't need it to. He takes the marble from his pocket and puts it down on the sand for a moment. It looks like a small planet under a shallow sky. He picks it up again. He is not finished with it. He suspects he will never be. A gull lands on the lifeguard stand and does the bird stillness trick. The buoy bell sentences the air. The tide turns in its mind before it turns in the world. Marcus breathes the way a person breathes when they are fogging a window to write a single word, and then wiping it away. He writes the word with his fingertip in the smooth place where a small wave has just pulled back. Thank you. The ocean edits the line, then keeps it. He turns inland with ordinary ground under his feet and a life ahead that will continue to be made of small, repeated mercies. Signs retaped, hands lifted, voices kept even, quarters counted, boys named and sent home, and a town that in its way knows how to listen when the water politely clears its throat. All right, take a breath with me. That was Sandbar Lights. Now let's head up the beach to a stand that won't sleep, the Lifeguard Stand After Dark. Fog comes in like careful curtains, pulled almost shut, but not quite, leaving a thumb of space where light can slip. Street lamps make soft cones in the mist, the kind that make people whisper without knowing why. After hours, the boardwalk loosens its shoulders, one latch closes, one broom taps wood, one cart rolls home, and the noise falls apart into comfortable hush. The lifeguard stand sits pale and high above the dark, a daytime chair that turns into a lookout memory at night. Nora arrives on schedule because schedules keep her stitched to the day. She is 32, steady, the sort of person who counts keys twice and leaves rooms better than she finds them. She used to work this post. Now she cleans restrooms, checks locks, makes sure the first aid box has what it promises. Even off duty, the stand draws her the way a porch light draws a moth that remembers its house. She carries a rag in her pocket, and a small tin whistle she found under the snack bar counter last week, tucked next to a stack of lemonade lids. The whistle shouldn't matter, it does. Its cord is tied in the knot she learned from an old guard who taught her not to panic when faces disappear under, loop, through, around, back through. A simple knot with a private meaning. He called it the promise knot, so we don't lose each other. He died 10 summers ago in a hospital that faced the river instead of the sea. The knot in her palm looks newly tied, as if someone's hands visited it a minute ago and left warmth behind. Nora sets the trash grabber against the post and climbs. The wood remembers her weight and answers with a sound she likes, honest creak, not complaint. From up here, the world is clean lines, the strand, the seam of surf. The darker water beyond that keeps its own counsel. She knows which lamp hums like a sleep talker, which buoy rings honest, which numbers lie when wind crosses tide. She has held too many radios not to hear the ocean's ordinary voice. Patient, working, pretending it has never held a grudge. She sits and lets the stand square her spine. She keeps the whistle coiled in her palm because her hand decided before her mind did. Fog breathes in and out over the bar. The effect is like a hand smoothing a sheet, then letting it rumple, then smoothing again. She counts sets without meaning to. 3 rolling out there now, uneven tails, a long shoulder on the third that could trick a rookie into thinking the break will be friendly when it thumbs a rip instead. Old training does not ask permission. It runs like a background app that refuses to quit. On calm nights, she takes inventory of small sounds. A sneaker squeaks once on boardwalk planks and stops. A late bus exhales at the town edge and then draws in as if surprised at its own patience. The tide pulls in syllables, lets them go, pulls again. She almost forgets the whistle in her hand until it taps her lifeline and reminds her why she brought it up the ladder. She holds it to the cone of streetlight and sees the faint bite marks on the tin, the small dings on the edge where someone's teeth found it in a hurry one summer and rested there because breath had better work to do. The cord is soft with salt. The knot sits exactly where the old guard set it when he joked that duty is just a promise you make to the people looking at you from the sand. She hears a second sound sift through the first, the breathy heh-heh of a swimmer clearing water from the nose. The sound is so plain and so exact, it stands her up before she decides to stand. The body knows the kind of noise it should always answer. "Where are you?" Nora asks, voice steady. The way you talk to a rookie who thinks a rip looks polite. Her tone is a bridge. She lets it reach, even if there is no one to cross. Fog answers by sharpening one place darker than the rest. It isn't a shadow, it is the idea of a person pressed into mist, the way a handprint lingers on a window you didn't realize was fogged. Nora keeps her boots planted. She sets 2 fingers on the rail because wood helps human nerves behave. She draws one slow breath in, one out, not to perform calm, but to supply simple oxygen to a mind about to remember more than it planned. The shape steps out of the fog onto the damp tilt below the stand. A boy, 13 maybe, hair plastered flat by hands that are not here. He is not dripping. He leaves no prints. He does not look at Nora. He looks at the stand itself, the way a kid looks at a teacher's empty desk, waiting for the bell to tell him what the room will decide to be. "Can I sit?" he asks. Not to her, but to the wood, like a child asking a church pew. Nora's fingers find the whistle. The cord warms against her skin, heat waking out of rope that should be cold. The knot presses the center of her palm like a coin. Training says ask name, measure breath, scan for help. Something older says keep the voice even and say yes. You can, she says, but you don't have to keep watch. He climbs the rungs without touching them, and still they creak. Wood, remembering weight. He settles on the seat with a relief that has nothing to do with muscle. He faces the water and lifts his hand at the first crest out of habit, palm high, that simple signal old guards use to say I see and I am seen. Nora answers without thinking the return they use to teach rookies: hand up, 2 beats, down, call, response. The exchange nudges a rule embedded in both of them, a rule older than this stand, older than the town. Fog thins, then thickens, then thins. Out beyond the bar, 3 low bumps rise, travel, and die, the third with that long shoulder again. The boy raises his hand once more, but slower, a salute to a set he never finished counting. The whistle hums in Nora's palm like a muted alarm, and then goes quiet, as if a bell has been damped respectfully. The knot rests, easy, like the memory has taken what it came for and will not ask for more. The whistle went under, the boy says, voice small and perfectly clear, as if a radio channel opened for him alone. I reached. I should have... He stops where all recountings stop, the place where air thins and the mind refuses to let the mouth walk past the door. There wasn't time, Nora says. She keeps her tone plain so the truth can travel without burning. You were one person. The sea was many. The words are not magic. They are weight shifted to the right beam. He breathes a square breath, the kind a coach taught at a pool deck once upon a time, and the breath fits him like a shirt, finally in his size. For a moment the fog becomes a theatre scrim. The bar shows through. The seam of deeper water beyond writes a darker sentence, and the lane lines of a memory lay themselves briefly over the real sea like transparent tape. Nora does not turn her head. She has learned that some sights want only the side of your gaze, or they slip. Below them, a teenager and a girl with a carp lantern walk the damp line and argue the way kids argue when they like each other better than their mouths admit. The boy in the stand does not glance down. He watches the water the way guards do when day is ending and swimmers forget that light is part of safety. Nora's hand keeps the whistle, but relaxes. The warmth of the cord spreads along her palm and into her wrist like a small medicine, the kind with no label that still works. Her shoulders drop the shrug they've been holding since the rescue that didn't stay rescued, the one that made her quit. No one blamed her. She blamed herself because grief loves a job and will work overtime if you let it. Tonight, the stand feels like a friend at a kitchen table, telling her in an ordinary voice that it's okay to stop wiping a clean counter. A breath catches in the fog, not the boy's, not Nora's. A third sound slips between them, thin as a thread, the small laugh a rookie made the day he got his first good save and tried to hide the fact that he wanted to run a lap and shout. Nora feels the laugh move through the wood and into her bones, then pass. The stand keeps its shape. The night keeps its patience. The boy keeps his seat. He lifts his hand one last time, and the fog, obedient now that someone has finished their part, begins to close. He stands and climbs down without touching wood. The place where he stood on the sand remains a little darker for a heartbeat longer, then becomes ordinary wet. He doesn't look back, he doesn't wave, he walks into the fog that pulls careful curtains behind him. Nora ties the whistle to the underside of the seat with the old knot, loop, through, around, back through. Her hands remembering the order better than her mouth could explain it. She rubs the cord once with the rag, so salt won't saw it thin too soon. She writes a note on duct tape and sticks it under the seat where daylight eyes won't go. If you find this, sit. breathe. It's not your job anymore. Morning will take the tape in a week. That's fine. Tape is for now. Knots are for longer. For a while she listens to the gentle proof that says what happened and when. Buoy counting patiently, sneaker squeak, the hush of small water choosing not to break. She thinks about watchers who never got to clock out, and about how a chair built out of boards can learn to hold a name. Down the beach, the teenager with the carp lantern pauses at the stand, lays a palm on the rung like a parishioner touching bronze, and moves on with a steadier spine. He will not know why he feels taller by a hair. He will call it nothing. It will not be nothing. Fog lifts by degrees. Stars blink in the holes like distant buoys telling bigger ships they're still out there doing their work. The ocean returns to its ordinary voice, the inside voice it uses when a hard story has been told, and quiet is the correct reply. Nora sets her palm on the seat once, a nurse checking a pulse she already knows is there, then climbs down. She leaves the beach how she found it, trash lids shut, restroom locks set, pathways clear, and takes the high path where the sand remembers the day's heat. At her car, she looks back. The stand holds its white square against the dark, a shape with a job again. The knot's impression stays in her palm long after the cord is out of it. The sensation is not weight, it is permission. She drives home with the window cracked and the radio low. The announcer reads weather like a prayer. Small craft advisory after midnight, surf building, caution near jetties. She nods as if the radio is a colleague. When the stoplight turns green, she says to no one in particular, "It's not your job anymore." And here's how the sentence frees exactly the right nerve. In the morning, beach kids will find the whistle, blow it once for fun, and tie it loosely to the post where daylight can see it. In fog, the stand will keep watch. It remembers how. And some future night, when a new caretaker climbs up to feel tall and steady again, their hand will find the old knot and recognize its shape at once, the feel of a lesson learned the hard way that chose to stay gentle. 2 weeks pass. Shoulder season holds. Mornings come clear enough for gulls to choose routes. Evenings fog in and out like breath. Nora works her loop. Locks, bins, rinse, mop, verify, sign. The whistle stays under the seat by day. Tourists spot it, blow it once, tie it where they found it. The stand accepts the ritual like a church that lets children ring the bell. At night, when fog thickens, the whistle is no longer visible from sand. Only hands that know where to look will find it, which is how some tools prefer things. On a Monday, that looks like a postcard until it doesn't. The wind takes a quarter turn nobody ordered. The sea changes posture. It isn't anger, it's decision. The third set stretches its shoulder in a way that looks generous and isn't. The patrol truck idles near the jetty. The officers step out with the calm of people whose hands know what they will do. A mother with a stroller, a father who keeps pacing as if motion could hold the day in place. 2 teenagers with bravado fading at the edges. These are the moving parts when Nora comes off shift and tells herself, out loud, that she is going home. She does not go home. She climbs the stand because old habits are better at telling the truth than new decisions. The stand grants a taller angle. Angles make better math. From up here, she sees what the beach hides from its own people, how the outflow from the creek stitches a rip that looks like invitation, how the bar lifts in one spot and drops in another, and how skin-deep water can open to chest-deep in 5 human steps if you choose the wrong row of bubbles to trust. She feels no hero impulse. She feels inventory, what is, what might be, what should not be allowed, if a voice can interfere in time. The voice that arrives is not hers. It is thin, tired, astonished to exist at all. Miss, the sound carries wrong, bent the way voices over water bend when fear pulls at them. Nora's eyes find the darker dark, the tell again. The shape is not where a swimmer belongs, it is exactly at the seam where footing pretends to be more than a pause. A boy stands there, maybe 12, maybe 13, the colour of someone who stays indoors and reads, but came out because sunset painted everything gold, and he wanted to walk in the paint. His hands are at his sides, like a student admitting a mistake. Nora's voice arrives in the tone that has saved more people than equipment ever has, even small, precise. Look at me. The boy looks up as if the stand itself is speaking. His mouth opens but chooses not to send words because sending them would cost balance. Don't move your feet, Nora says. You're okay where you are. Don't test it. The words cross the distance with the right weight. A rookie would add more syllables. She doesn't. Fog pulls one curtain and then another. In the second curtain, older footsteps appear, the ones that leave no print and still make wood remember. The hair on Nora's arms lifts with the simple electricity of recognition. The boy from 2 weeks ago has come back, or his watch has. He stands on the damp tilt below the stand, mirroring the living boy's posture without being noticed. He does not look at Nora, he looks at the stand. In his gaze sits a question that isn't a question. Do we keep watch, or do we let go? Nora answers him by speaking to the living one. On my hand, she says, and lifts a palm at set height. When I drop my hand, you'll lift your right foot 2 inches, set it down in front of your left, then stop. Do not test with your toe. The full step, we're going to slide sideways. I won't climb down, I'm staying here. You copy me. Do you understand? Yes, the living boy says. His voice sounds like someone put it through a filter. Fear does that, and small bodies in cold water do that too. He isn't in cold yet. He would be in 30 seconds if he guesses wrong. The patrol officers clock the scene the way good teams do. No elbows, no drama. One feeds out a throwbag line and lays it parallel to the wet edge, as if laying a string on a hem you want straight. The other takes the long aluminum pole, the lever that looks comical, until it has a life on its tip. They do not flash lights. Night vision is a resource they won't burn. Nora drops her hand. The boy lifts his right foot 2 inches and sets it where she spoke to, instead of where fear wants. The floor under that foot holds. A visible shiver passes through him like a word he will never say aloud. Good, Nora says. Her voice has the same temperature as the air. She keeps her hand level, stops, shifts, stops. Again. He does it. The bar under his left foot stays honest because the sea, in its way, likes rules, and is obeying one someone taught it long before this town existed. Out of the fog one more shape presses, thin, not flesh, a lightness that still manages weight. The boy watcher below the stand lifts his hand at the set the way guards do when they see and are seen. Nora answers with a 2-beat raise, the smallest priesthood in the world. The living boy copies the movement without knowing he is participating in an old language. Later he will remember the feeling of his hand lifting at a wave and say it felt like asking permission to leave. He will be right. A teenager runs from down beach with a carp lantern bouncing and stops after 3 steps because the scene is not for running. He puts his hands in his pockets and takes them out, mystified by his own good choice. The mother at the stroller says a person's name, the living boy's name, quiet and firm, like a line tied at both ends. The father stops pacing and in stopping becomes useful again. The patrol officer with the pole meets Nora's eye and nods assent to a plan they never spoke. You call the steps. He will be ready to lever if the floor forgets what it promised. Now, Nora says. 1 word, not loud. The boy takes the last sideways slide that keeps the bottom a friend. He reaches the throwbag line. He does not grab. He lays his wrist on it the way people lay the back of their hand on a hot kettle to test if it will harm. The officer says, "Okay." The line says nothing. The ocean, satisfied that the work has been done politely, relaxes the angle by half. The boy's knees argue with his brain, and lose. He wobbles into the honest wet near shore. The officer steadies him with a touch that is not possession and not spectacle. The mother lets out a breath that will live in her ribs for a week. The father puts a hand on the stroller handle like it is a mast. The teenager with the carp lantern looks at the water and then at the stand, as if trying to give credit to the correct object. Nora keeps her seat until the boy is 3 paces into sand that remembers the day's heat. Then she stands and climbs down. The first thing she does is nothing. She does not take a bow. She does not hurry to the family because ownership can tarnish relief. She puts her hand on the post where the note hides under the seat. The whistle hums once against the wood, a vibration too small for anyone else to notice. The boy watcher below the stand lifts his hand one last time and then lets the fog close him like paper folds. "Thank you," the mother says to Nora, and to no one in particular, and to the entire arrangement of night. Thanks are plural when you count correctly. The living boy, cheeks bright with embarrassment and life, says sorry to his parents, and thank you to Nora, and I didn't know to the officer, who replies, "Nobody knows until they do," which is the correct answer. The teenager with the lantern says nothing and learns everything. He will keep his hands out of his pockets next time. Nora ties nothing new. She fixes nothing that isn't broken. She looks at the long aluminum pole and feels an ordinary gratitude for ugly tools that end stories early. The patrol folds the line. The wind drops its shoulder. The bar remembers its manners. The ocean resumes its inside voice. She could build a church on that voice. She won't. Churches get strange when they try to own tides. At the snack bar door, she straightens the taped sign, "Low tide, safe, bar moves, count your steps," and adds a small 4th line with the stub of a pencil she keeps behind a meter. "Listen when the water asks." She presses the tape corners flat. A manager will peel and replace this sign 3 times in the next few years. No manager can peel the habit the sentence makes in people who read it twice. That night, at home, Nora eats toast with honey and sits by the window that faces the sound. She turns the radio low. The weatherman reads the small craft advisory with the cadence of someone who wishes they could tuck people in. She closes her eyes and thinks of the boy's hand lifting at the set. She thinks of the watch that wanted to end and got to end without breaking anything. She thinks of the old guard's knot and how some promises keep you even when you stop keeping watch. She sleeps well, which is a form of praise. The town's lantern night begins with paper fish and patient hands. Dusk lays a lavender stripe where ocean meets sky, and the breeze settles into the gentle push that keeps flames agreeable. Children carry carp and minnows cut from colored vellum, each lit from inside by a safe little LED that pretends to be fire well enough for the oldest part of the brain to relax. Vendors button their booths and leave sugar in the air. The band on the gazebo plays surf guitar a notch too soft, as if not to disturb the water. From the parking lot to the tide line, the whole beach becomes a hallway of small lights, moving toward a door everyone knows without saying. Nora moves through her loop as if threading a needle, check the restrooms, lift the lids, straighten the first aid kit, sweep sand from the cement pad where people with strollers gather to organize themselves. The patrol truck heels off, 2 officers on foot, to be less visible and more present. A pair of volunteer teachers walk the high line with the confident clumsiness of people who love children and forget how tall they look to them. And there, as steady as a postage stamp on a letter, sits the Lifeguard Stand, white, square, a quiet balcony that has learned not to ask for attention and still receives it. The whistle is right where she left it, tucked beneath the seat on its promised knot. She touches the cord with 2 fingers, the way you touch a friend's shoulder in a crowd to say, "I'm here." She does not pull it free. Tonight is lanterns and lessons that do not require sound. She climbs anyway, because height gives angles and angles give math. From the seat, the town looks correctly assembled, lanterns in small constellations, parents clustered in soft ovals, the seam of surf writing a repeating sentence the ocean has practiced for millennia. A thin tide, a modest bar, honest water, pretending to be easy. "Pretty, right?" says a voice at the base of the stand, and she recognizes the sound before she looks. Conti, older this year, smaller this year, cap thick with the old salt that lives in fabric long past washings. He leans on the post with the comfort of a man leaning on a neighbour's fence. My father used to say lanterns put manners on the night. They help people walk slow, Nora says. It's the remark of a colleague. Conti nods as if they've agreed to split a job. The parade starts with a hush that isn't quite reverence and isn't quite fear. It's the soft quiet that falls whenever light leaves human hands and still behaves. Children process past like moving punctuation marks, commas and semicolons that turn the sand into a page. The band pauses to drink water and, in the space where music isn't, the ocean's voice rises 1 notch, belay pin tap, swell hush, gull reed. The first line of lanterns reaches the damp line and stalls, then fans out in an accidental arc, everyone making a choice at once without knowing they're part of a choreography. Nora sees the moment the pattern might tip wrong. It isn't big. Just a new boy slipping ahead of his group because the wet sand looks like a stage. He is 12, maybe 13. The age, hope and risk look like the same door. Bare feet. A paper carp in one hand with a tail of red ribbon that flickers in wind. He isn't disobedient, he is delighted, and he steps onto the first shine without asking if shine means floor or pause. "Hey," Nora says, 1 small syllable with a weight the room recognizes. The boy looks up and stops, lucky enough to have the sort of nerves that listen when an adult's voice contains a not yet story. A second, older boy, 15, lantern on a stick like a flag, starts to run, then stops himself because the patrol officer nearest him lifts 1 palm. Running is for after. This is for stillness. The seam itself offers its opinion. The outflow from the creek, invisible while the band played, finds the low and draws a dark ribbon under the boy's next step. The bar beyond rolls 1 shoulder a hand's width closer to deep. Not a trap, not malice, just physics in a mood. Nora does not climb down. She raises her hand at set height and keeps her voice level. "On me!" She gives the old deck signal. Hand up, hold, a small draw to the left. And the boy, who has never learned it, copies as if he had been practicing all year in a room he doesn't remember. He slides his right foot 2 inches while keeping his weight where it already holds. The floor under that 2 inches stays honest. The boy's mouth shapes a thank you he doesn't send. He doesn't have to. The sending happens in the way his shoulders drop a thumb's width. Cal is there, almost before she thinks his name, moving from the teacher cluster with the compact speed of a person who trains other people how to walk backward out of water that pretends to be polite. He doesn't shout, he doesn't claim, He takes a line 2 body lengths upshore where his hands can serve as a fence and his presence can instruct without becoming a stage. The patrol officer arcs wider with the aluminum pole, ridiculous in daylight, sacred at night, and places the tip exactly where the bar likes to change its mind. A neighbor holds a lantern higher so the boy can see what isn't there. In the lift of that paper light lies the entire contract the town keeps with itself. Good, Nora says, when the boy's next slide keeps him on honest ground. Again! The boy does it and breathes in a square, the way people breathe when their body is deciding to be brave. He reaches the throw line that is not yet thrown, lays his wrist on it, a test, not a grab, and at that mere contact relearns how to stand in a night that has been asking him to kneel. The water makes its decision, not tonight. The bar remembers manners, the seam unclenches. The patrol officer lowers the pole without fanfare. Cal folds his hands at his chest and lets invisible students see what finished looks like. Nora lowers her hand. The boy steps back to the high line, cheeks full of heat that will turn to embarrassment in an hour and to pride in a year. The red ribbon on his carp tail flutters in wind like a heartbeat you can actually see. Behind him, a different boy has paused at the base of the stand, the one who once sat without weight, who asked permission of the wood instead of the woman. He does not look up. He looks at the seat as if counting. Nora feels the impression of the knot in her palm with no rope in it. She keeps her mouth closed and her breath steady. The stand holds the name it holds. It needs nothing more from her than attention. The parade regathers and moves on. Parents go back to sentences about bedtime and hot chocolate. The band resumes and folds the mistake into music. The patrol drifts to the jetty and becomes silhouettes with competence. Conti taps the post with one knuckle. "Seem behaved," he says, as if reporting weather to a colleague over coffee. "Good seam tonight. Knows how to listen." "They don't always," Nora answers, and he snorts because understatement is a dialect they both speak. She climbs down and walks the high line with Cal. They do what professionals do after a near miss, make the story smaller, accurate, useful. They talk angles. They talk the trick of a bar that looks friendlier under lantern light. They talk about the rule she wrote on the snack bar door, listen when the water asks, and how signs work on people like small stones in a pocket. Wait, you do not notice until you choose right because it was there. "You saw him too," Cal says after a while, phrasing it so it isn't a test. He keeps his eyes on the seam, not on her. He's learned to let a subject keep air around it. "I saw the stand, remember," she says, which is the truth she can carry. "That's enough." Cal nods. "My students don't ask for proof anymore," he says. "Proof takes too long and arrives after the part that mattered." "Proof is for paper," Nora says. "Breath is for now." The line lands between them with a small click, the sound of a system that fits. Lantern night ends the way good nights do. Gradually, with no hurry and no lesson trying to be bigger than the people it served. Parents carry sleeping children, teenagers pretend not to care, and fail at pretending in ways that give adults hope. The stand goes white against a darker sky. The whistle stays tied. The knot holds its quiet. Back at the snack bar, Nora straightens the tape corners on the sign. The letters look steady in the yellow light. She presses her thumb against the plastic until her print fogs it like a small weather system, then wipes it with the rag. In the low hum of the closed town, she hears what she always listens for. The global inside voice the ocean uses when the day has behaved. An ordinary hush that tonight sounds like approval. On her way to the car, she looks back one last time. A gull has chosen the stand roof and performs that bird stillness, head down, body level, that always makes her feel too loud. The buoy bell out there counts. The seam out there rests. The boy down here, alive, bright, moves with a new exactness, walking along the high line with his carp lantern held like a promise he intends to keep. She lets the picture settle in her mind without framing it, because framing is for later, and later can ruin the living of a thing. She drives home with the window cracked and the radio low. The weather reader blesses small craft with the usual caution and signs off with a voice that sounds like a hand resting on a shoulder. Nora says aloud to the invisible, "You can clock out," and hears the room agree. Time does what time does, sands down corners, brightens edges you thought would fade, files the sharpest nights into tools you can use. Boards get repainted, the stand stays itself. The knot under the seat darkens to the color. Old rope turns when it keeps a promise longer than anyone thought necessary. Managers come and go, each replacing the sign inside the snack bar door as if new plastic makes new truth. Nora keeps replacing the sentence that matters on whatever plastic they choose. Low tide, safe. Bar moves, count your steps. Listen when the water asks. 4 lines that fit on a lunch tray, light enough to carry out of a bad idea. She does not return to guarding. Her knees vote no, and her sleep requires a job that does not pretend to be a siren. She becomes the person towns lean on without bragging, the one who knows where the shut-off valves are, and which locks stick in humidity, and which lamp hums like a sleep talker, and which tourists question wants a map, and which one needs a story. She trains summer kids how to hold a broom so the body still likes them at the end of August. She learns to speak to visitors the way the ocean speaks when it is trying to be kind, simply, without adjectives, from a place of vast patience. Cal starts a program at the community college, field hydrology, coastal safety, a practical class with no romance, and a waiting list anyway. He doesn't tell anyone about ghosts. He tells them about seams and shoulders and the difference between friendly and safe. On the first day of every term, he takes the class to the high line and points at nothing. Students squint at where he points, which is the point. Where does the bottom change its mind? He asks. By the last day, most can answer with a toe, without words. One autumn, a mailing tube arrives addressed to Nora at the town office. No return address, handwriting careful enough to suggest respect. Inside is a rolled chart with no names, only strokes, drawn by a hand that has painted signs and straightened letters for a living. In the margin, for the drawer, by the AED, not to be framed, to be used. She knows whose hand it is without needing to read a name. She slides the chart into the drawer under the extra scissors and above the lost and found flip-flops. She does not show it off. She will take it out when a new officer wants a private tutorial on the old seam that outlived the boat that named it. On a Wednesday, lit the way good ceramic looks in a window, the glossy kind of day that makes tourists swear they could live here, Nora finds the whistle gone. Not stolen, not misplaced. Gone the way tools go when they graduate. The cord's ghost circle remains pressed into salt. The knot imprint is still on the wood, a shallow relief where rope taught pine how to remember. She sits on the seat with her hands quiet in her lap and lets the absence arrive on its own speed. She feels no panic. She feels the gentle tug a ribbon makes when untied. Under the seat, where tape always peels, her duct tape note is long gone. She writes nothing new. Some instructions travel without paper. That night, she dreams the kind of dream that makes no theatre of itself. It is only a hallway with doors labelled in pencil, clock out, go back, count your steps, and at the end, a door with no label that opens into an ordinary morning. She wakes with a taste of salt and honey and the surety that grief, when done correctly, becomes maintenance. She eats toast and goes to work. A storm season comes that scares the people who moved here for sunsets. Windows get cross-taped, sandbags build walls that are both useful and a way to keep hands busy. The stand is pulled and stored in a shed that smells like old rope and thawed bait. The beach looks wrong without it, like a room with the table taken away, all chairs adrift. Nora helps stack boards and label hardware with a black marker that squeaks in cold. She pauses once with a bolt in her hand and says, "Stay," not to the wood, but to the idea, and then laughs at herself for talking out loud to a concept. Out loud or not, the idea stays. When the stand returns in spring, kids touch the rungs like parishioners do bronze. An out-of-town crew tries to place it 3 meters down beach for better symmetry with a new set of trash cans. Nora watches for a minute and then says evenly, 2 meters back north. She doesn't mention the seam, she doesn't mention the whistle. She doesn't say, "Trust me." She says, 2 meters, and her voice contains enough proof that people move things without needing to be told why. A decade accumulates, the festival keeps its manners, Conti's chair remains by the post until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, the chair is there without him for one lantern night, and then disappears in a way that feels correct. The new bait shop kid wears the cap. The marble ends up on Nora's desk by unclear routes, palm to pocket, to bowl to envelope to drawer, and sometimes she keeps it in her coat, a round reminder that counting can be a comfort and not a cage. On complicated days, she rolls it between thumb and finger and feels her breath decide to be simple. On a clear, bright morning with water the colour of good glass, a pair of college students approach the stand with clipboards. They introduce themselves with the careful politeness of grant-funded researchers who don't want to offend the town they need. They ask if they can photograph the stand for a paper on vernacular coastal artifacts, objects that become semi-sacred without anyone saying so. Nora says yes, and then says, "But take one picture from here," and shows them the only angle that matters. From the high line, with the seam drawn faintly by nothing, the stand held like a bracket against a piece of grammar invisible to cameras. One student gets it, the other writes a sentence he will not understand until later. That is acceptable. Later is how humans work. On a summer evening warm enough to make the town smell like waffle cones and sunscreen, a middle-aged man pauses at the base of the stand, hand on the rung, the way teenagers do when they don't know they're praying. He looks up and says, "You're the one, right?" Nora measures the one and decides the pronoun belongs to the stand, not to her. She says, "We're the ones," and the man nods the specific nod of a person who was once a boy in a blanket in the back of a patrol truck, learning how to be warm again. His daughter, tall, too clever for her age, asks why the wood is worn smooth in that one place under the seat. He says, "Because people remember there," which is a proper answer. Cal sends her a photo from a winter conference, a slide with 4 bullet points that look familiar. Low tide safe, bar moves, count your steps, listen when the water asks. He texts, "Borrowed your slide." She replies, "Borrowed from the water." He replies, "Same source then." The joke lands like a good step, firm, dry, honest. Late, much later, after a day of small tasks and one slightly dramatic bee removal from a trash can, Nora climbs the stand just because her body asked. It is not foggy, it is not festival night. It is exactly the sort of evening when nothing supernatural would dare interrupt the satisfaction of ordinary work done well. The wood remembers her weight, the seat sets her spine straight. She puts both hands on her knees and looks at the line where the tide has pinned the last of the light. In the near distance, 3 gulls make a row and break it. Farther out, a set rises with the old long shoulder. She lifts her hand without thinking and sets it down. No one answers. Good. Not everything is a conversation. Sometimes ritual is just breathing with a rhythm bigger than you and remembering that you are allowed to be small. She hears a sound that is not sound, the stand's private way of telling her the evening is balanced. If you had to name it, you might call it the syllable enough. She takes out the rag and wipes an invisible smear from the rail. She checks the bolts with a look. She touches the underside of the seat where the knot once sat and feels the wood's memory press back. She says, "Thank you," and the ocean edits the words into the large hush it prefers, filing them in its archive of small, correct human noises. On her way down, she meets a new custodian halfway up, a kid with earnest eyes who counts keys the loud way. He says, "Anything I should know?" She smiles and gives him the handful of instruction that matters most, because it can survive 1,000 retellings without losing its shape. Keep the lids closed, walk the high line. If you hear your body say stop, stop. If you feel invited, count your steps, and if the water asks for quiet, give it quiet. The kid nods as if she handed him a tool. He will forget a piece and remember another, and, in a year, have his own version that says the same thing with his own mouth. That is how towns keep themselves. On the flat wet where waves have just pulled back, Nora writes one word with the side of her shoe. Home. The next wash takes it and leaves the sand looking as if the word never existed. But the act of writing sits in her chest like warmth. She walks the high line back toward lights, and the lifeguard stand stays behind, white, square, a lookout with a long memory, holding its post against a seam that moves, and a sea that keeps working, and a town that in its best hours listens when the water politely clears its throat. She sleeps the way decent work lets you sleep, without hero dreams, without inventory, with the radio low and the window cracked and the sure sense that if someone needs a voice at the edge, the night will find the right one in time. On the desk by the door, the marble rests in its bowl, round as a planet. In the drawer at the office, the chart waits for the next pair of hands that wants to learn where the bottom changes its mind. And under a sky that belongs to no one, the ocean keeps its ordinary voice, which is the kindest miracle in the whole arrangement. All right, keep your headphones on, fog lifts, and something glints under kelp. Message in the Whitecaps. Evening smooths itself over the Gulf like fresh paint. The storm that missed town leaves only better sunsets and a curl of wreckage along the high water mark. Sea oat stems, 2 flip-flops that will never meet again, a length of line with one good knot, and a lot of history. Eduardo walks the hour he always walks, the hour when people go inside and porch lights come on, and the sea edits its own sentences. He is 60, retired from sign work, wrists that still remember straight letters even when the mind wants to drift. He reads beaches the way he read storefronts for 40 years, by strokes, by edges, by how light falls on the verticals and the diagonals and makes them mean more than their parts. He does not come for romance. He comes because the water knows how to quiet a room. He counts quietly without moving his lips. 5 pelicans in a ragged V, 7 people left on the strand, 2 children arguing about shells, and then forgetting mid-argument because the air tastes like oranges after rain. Far out, bars lift their pale backs and lay them down. The tide begins the slow turn it always begins around this time, a choice you hear before you see. He likes the moment before the choice shows itself. That is when letters start to appear in the foam, if they are going to appear at all. The bottle stands under a hummock of kelp like a small glass lighthouse that fell over and kept the light. The glass is old, the green kind with tiny bubbles that look like trapped breath. No label, no romance twine, no help me note, sanded thin for drama. The cork has been sanded down by travel until it sits lower than it should, like a hat worn long enough to earn a shape. Eduardo nudges it with the side of his shoe, and the bottle rolls toward the runnel, then stops as if remembering that glass should not hurry. He picks it up. It is cool, not cold. Inside there is a rag of chart paper, clean lines where a coast once had a name, and no name now, an X not far from where he stands. He does not smile at this. He has aged beyond the smile people expect when bottles and maps show up to do a trick. He slips his thumbnail under the cork and works it free. Not a pop, just a breath. When he unrolls the scrap, the wind shifts. That is the first odd thing. A gust isn't unusual. This is not a gust. It is a polite turn, like a person clearing their throat before they speak. The foam lines that had been lacing and unlacing the shallows rearrange as if a hand under the surface set them straight with a ruler. He knows ruler true when he sees it. He has made R's and U's so true a man swore he could rest a spirit level on them. The new foam lines write nothing a camera would see. A camera is bad at handwriting, a sign painter's eye is better. He squints the way he used to squint at a wall when a client asked for a word to be bolder, but kinda like it's whispering. The long vertical of an L, the quick cross of a T. The C wipes its own attempt before the O can finish. He blinks and the water writes again, concentrating like a student asked to show work. Let. Then the wash pulls it away, embarrassed by its own handwriting. He stands where the wet sand turns mirror, where a thin film makes the world double. He sees himself twice. One man with a bottle, and one man with a bottle and a set of responsibilities. Somewhere between those two, a voice he knows by heart speaks in the tone it used to use when reading weather aloud from the radio. Small craft advisory through evening, Rosa says, every syllable careful, like a person placing glass on shelves. Caution near jetties, swimmers clear the bar at dusk. She is not here. She is 3 years gone and he has learned to live with corridors that feel half lit. But the voice arrives with the wind, and when he answers, I know he is talking to air that smells like the inside of their old cooler, salt and lemon, and the hint of something sweet. He looks down at the scrap. The X sits plain. Not theatrical, practical. He lifts his eyes to where the X ought to be if the map is not lying. The bar there shows its pale back, a long sand muscle flexing under a thin skin of water. It is farther out than usual, the sort of farther that tempts exactly the wrong people to go see how far they can go. He has spoken that sentence to tourists for years. Far is where the floor forgets what it promised you. He has said it in 5 versions, in English and Spanish, and in the pointed hand gestures that mean, please listen to an old man for 10 seconds. Sometimes it worked. The worst evenings were the ones when it almost worked. A dog barks at the bottle. Not a mean bark, an opinionated bark. A boy follows it, a kid from the condos, who throws tennis balls all afternoon and has a face like sun on a spoon, bright and honest and hard to look at too long. You find treasure? The boy asks, already pleased, because treasure is a story word, and kids like when adults say story words back. Eduardo holds the bottle up and lets it catch the angle of the sunset, the way he used to check gold leaf for gaps. Treasure that knows how to hide, he says. The boy nods as if that is the best kind. The dog barks at the bar, 2 short notes and 1 long, like a code. The boy says, she hates waves, as if that explains it, and because he is 12, he is correct, without knowing why. Eduardo turns the chart scrap so the sea breeze can read it. He isn't making a show, he wants whatever this arrangement is to know he is cooperating. The foam does the L again, then the T again, then starts the O and smears it with its own hand. Let! And then the line breaks. He watches one more cycle. The wash tightens as if setting its jaw. Let go. The last letter breaks as it is being written and still says itself. He hears Rosa in the place. Grief lives. Let it go, she says, the way she used to say it when he argued with a brush that would not hold a point. You're holding too tight. You're making the stroke nervous. Let it go, and it will go where it needs. He could throw the bottle back. He could keep it for the shelf with the other honest junk that told his living room it belonged to a person who walks. He could put it in the city bin because men of 60 make tidy decisions when they can. He sets it down on the mirror line and steps back. The next wash lifts it a hand's width, as if the sea has a soft finger under it, and pulls it toward the bar. It pauses at the shallow, as if unsure how to handle a thing returning itself. He stays where the wet is thin and the sand holds his weight without bargaining. A woman stands on the bright edge like someone waiting for her ride. He knows her shape from the walk. He painted her name on a boat once for a joke. Rosa. Fast enough. The letters were a little too jaunty, the way love is when it shows off, but she laughed and made a show of approving the spacing. She taught him to read rips the way she taught him to read menus when they were young and poor, and places were out of his comfort. She is not here. He has told himself that for 3 years. The shape that waits on the bar is a shadow with posture. The sea is making a case. The bottle reaches her feet, if those are feet, tips, and lets the chart slip out like a note tired of being folded. He takes one step forward without meaning to. The floor answers with a warning, soft in the heel, firmer in the toe, the way sand does when it wants you to understand that the next meter will turn your decisions into stories for strangers. He stops. He watches his own hand unclench. He finds the place inside the ribs where numbers live and asks them to hold their ground. The foam writes one more time with less flourish, like a sign painter doing a last touch-up before climbing down from the ladder. Let her go. He thinks of all the times he tightened a stroke until it looked like a fist. The hours bent over a wall with a mahl stick across his knuckles to keep the left to right honest. The way grief and paint both punish you for gripping. He breathes a square breath the way Rosa taught him, 4 in, hold, 4 out, hold, and the square stands up inside his chest like scaffolding. He sets the bottle where the next wash can take it. It goes. The chart sinks the way a leaf finds soil. The bar unknits like someone unbraiding hair that slept with too much salt in it. The woman's outline loosens. She glances back once, not at him, not exactly, but at the shore where they used to scan for rips like 2 librarians looking for misfiled books. Then she turns toward the slow line of pelicans and becomes water-moving where it should. He stands in place until the mirror line releases the double. He waits one more set for good manners. He says, "Thank you," in a voice low enough to pass for wind. He takes the long way home on the high sand where the sea leaves notes. Eelgrass curled like handwriting, a stick with one end chewed, a crab shell set down like a mask someone wore to a nice party and forgot on purpose. That night he opens the window and leaves the porch light off. He eats toast with honey and sits with the radio low while the weatherman reads caution like prayer. He does not cry. He is not out of tears. He is out of the kind that serve no one. He goes to bed with his left hand relaxed for the first time in a year. The house breathes in that relieved way houses do when people stop arguing with their own furniture. In the morning he will take a brush to the shore and write thank you in the wet where foam can reach, and the sea will edit the line and keep it, and that will be enough liturgy for a man who never went in for churches. Days become the kind you think coastal towns get every day when you don't live in one. Clean blue, sun that understands courtesy, a breeze that takes the temperature down a notch and then sits on the porch and behaves. Workmen fix a railing no one will thank them for. A woman jogs with a dog that looks like it could recite poetry. Eduardo walks later because later suits the new calm in his chest. He does not look for bottles. He looks for letters the way a person looks for their name on a list they didn't sign up for and secretly hope to find anyway. The first letter appears when he isn't trying. Foam ties a quick cross just above the runnel and then fixes the vertical so neatly he could have put a chalk line under it. He stops like a man who hears his name said correctly by a stranger. "Ah," he thinks, and then laughs at himself because R is a human letter and the C doesn't owe him human alphabets. Still, the stroke is clean. He waits for the C to make a lie of it. It doesn't. It smooths the bar where her feet were and leaves the rest alone. He talks aloud less now. He has learned that the air is patient but has other jobs. When he does speak, he says, "shop things." That edge is true, he says to a line of foam. That angle will read from the road. He hears Rosa's voice approve the way foremen approve. No fuss, only a single syllable that contains a paragraph. Good. At the condo path, a neighbour with a salt-bleached visor asks if he is still painting. He says he's retired, and she looks at his hands like hands don't retire, which is fair. He says he paints signs on the inside of his head so walls don't get cocky. She laughs and returns to the difficult task of making a small dog understand leashes are not tyranny. The dog looks back at him, eyes bright, as if asking whether the leash is a letter or a line. He gives it a nod that says even lines can be kind. A week goes by without a bottle and without grief inventing work to do. He writes "thank you" in the wet most evenings because the act suits the hour, then lets the sea edit it away. One night the letters hold 2 full breaths before the wash takes them. He takes that as a compliment. Another night the wash removes the H immediately, leaving "tank you," which is not a thing but looks like one. He snorts. "Fair," he says to no one. He had once painted a T backwards on a pharmacy window at noon in July, and Rosa had kissed him for the mistake, because mistakes are proof of life. He left it until after the supper rush, so the town could enjoy imperfection before it got sanded. The second oddness, after the bottle, after the LET, go, is not a shape on the water. It is a missing sound. The buoy bell at the river mouth sentences the air every few minutes, honest, patient. One evening it forgets to speak for longer than it should. The gap is not dangerous. It is instructive. He realizes how much he rests his day on notes he does not own. He waits without tapping his foot. The bell remembers itself and apologizes in the way bells apologize, by doing its job slightly more often for the next 10 minutes. He meets Cal without knowing his name. The young man has a clipboard and the careful politeness of someone using a grant to ask a town for its wisdom. He is out measuring set intervals, mapping where the bar likes to lift and settle. "Students," he says, and then grins, like he just remembered how good it feels to say "my students." Eduardo approves. He likes people who put their hands into work that matters and keep them there until the work pays out. "What are you measuring?" he asks, though he could guess. "Where the bottom changes its mind," Cal says, and it's the right answer. We mark the seam and then come back after weather, compare the lines, try to make a habit out of not being surprised. "Habits beat heroics," Eduardo says, and Cal nods like he wants to sew that on something. They walk together a few minutes, one man counting with a stick, one man counting with eyes. Cal asks about rips, about winter sets, about whether the old hands spoke of seams the way they speak of boats, proper names for sand that moves. Eduardo says some did, some didn't, and the ones worth listening to had a way of telling you the same simple truth 100 times without getting bored with their own sentence. "What would you teach first?" Cal asks. "Where to stand," Eduardo says, and Cal writes it down even though he won't need the ink. That night, the foam tries a word too long for water. He watches the strokes like you watch a child haul a chair across the kitchen to reach something they shouldn't. Lee, then a smear, then B, and a scold of a set that knocks the line out. Let, again, stubborn. He doesn't help. He stands with his hands behind his back like a teacher who refuses to pick up the chalk because the lesson will only land if the student sees themselves make it. The wash finally writes "let be" with the E mangled and still clear. He nods, the way men nod at rain gauges. "That's enough English for a Wednesday," he says. At home, he opens the drawer where he kept brushes like orchids. He takes out the one he did not throw away when he swore he was done. It is soft, loyal, a little splayed. He mixes water and the cheap paint a neighbor kid left when they moved, and he writes Rosa small on the inside of a kitchen cabinet. He does not make the letters fancy. He makes them clean. He closes the door and stands there with his hand on the wood like he has just turned off a light in a room where someone rests. A month-ish goes by in Gulf time. Festivals, a cold snap no one believed, 2 weddings on the public part of the Strand that managed not to step on each other's photographs, 1 new sign for the bait shop that needed the R to sing a tiny bit more. The town becomes deeper in its habits. Eduardo becomes freer in his. He stops checking for proofs he cannot spend. He starts answering tourist questions like he is writing instructions on a chalkboard. Low tide does not mean safe. The bar moves even when you look at it. Count your steps on the way out so you can count them back. A man from Ohio thanks him as if he has handed over a secret recipe. A woman from Nebraska listens the way Midwesterners listen to weather, politely, and then with all their muscles. He loves them a little for trying. The next bottle appears at dusk like a comma in a sentence that got too proud. Not at his feet, 40 yards down. A kid finds it and shouts, and 3 more kids gather, and the circle around treasure becomes exactly the shape circles always become. He does not go. It isn't for him. The dog from before trots over and gives him a look like you see it too, then returns to supervise as only dogs can. The kids work at the cork with heroic incompetence and then hand it to a mother who loosens it with the same wrist action she uses to open jars when her partner isn't looking. A paper comes out, plain printer paper, not a chart, with a scribble that might be nothing and might be a name. The kids yell, "Pirate!" and are told pirates did not have office supplies. The sea goes on making its case with foam and with patience. He allows himself a smile this time, the small kind you hide when you catch yourself becoming someone's grandfather without the paperwork. Later, with the Strand soft empty and the sky remembering stars, he walks the line where the last of the day's gloss stays thin. He writes gracious with the brush he brought from home, a little paint in a little jar, and lets the sea have the line. It blurs and holds and blurs. He prefers when it edits quickly. Leaving the word too long on the sand feels like bragging. The quick erase makes the giving cleaner. He does not see Rosa again on the bar, that is correct. He does not need her to stand there to prove she stood there once. Memory has moved out of the theatre and into the maintenance. He oils the kitchen hinges. He changes the porch bulb before it dies, so he will not have to climb a stepladder at midnight in a mood. He takes a broken no parking board from a neighbor and makes a little sign for himself and nails it into the fence where he will see it before he leaves. Breathe slow. Count your steps. Let it go. The last line he writes last and first and last again, because hands like to practice more than they like to understand. On a day when clouds stack like folded quilts, Cal finds him and asks if he will talk to a class. Eduardo says he can walk with a class. Talking is for rooms, walking is for this. They go along the high sand and he asks the students questions that are only questions if you don't listen to the tone. Where would you put your second foot? Show me where the bottom gets ideas above its station. If the bell stopped, how long before you noticed? He makes them look, and then look again, and then close their eyes and point. He's not mystical about it, but he's not embarrassed by the part of knowledge that feels like you grew a new sensor in your ankles. One girl, pale and careful, points dead right on the seam and then blushes as if she cheated. He tells her some people come into the world with a tide line printed under the skin. He says it as if it's a normal compliment. She smiles like someone who has been handed a tool and told it has a name. In the evening, after the class and after a supper, he eats standing, because the radio caught him mid-bite reading a front moving in from the west. He goes out for his walk. The foam writes nothing fancy, only the straight strokes you need to teach a child how to read. He writes thank you where water can edit it, and this time the word holds for a full set, which feels like the sea signing something without asking for a pen. He thinks of the bottle and how he didn't keep it, and how keeping it would have turned a message into an object. An object is a poor end for a message. He leaves his shoes at the condo stairs and goes in barefoot like a boy who has been told he can. He sleeps without heroic dreams. The house breathes. The bell sentences the air on schedule. In the morning, he will walk again. He will not expect letters. He will get letters anyway because some alphabets are generous when you stop asking them to prove they exist. The day forgets itself in pieces. Heat goes first, not in a dramatic door slam, but in a steady, house-proud way. Windows opened, fans clicked off, a town letting the temperature out like a held breath. Then light goes strange. Shadows put elbows in places they don't belong. The gulls change schedules without updating anyone. The weatherman, who has learned to talk like a nurse, reads the advisory in a tone that says, "This is not theatre, but do please listen. Southeast wind building, short period chop, poor visibility in squalls, caution at bars and jetties." Eduardo hears Rosa's echo tucked inside his cadence, the old phrase she used when water looked tired of being polite. It's thinking with its teeth tonight. By afternoon, the gulf shows its older face, harder, heavier, a surface full of small decisions made without committee. The bell at the river mouth speaks more than it should, like a clerk staying late to finish a stack. Tourists swear the sky is still blue. Locals develop errands that keep them near doorways. Eduardo sharpens a pencil with a pocket knife because the habit of ready edges never left his hands. He folds a piece of cheap paper into his shirt pocket, like a bit of courage you can touch. He walks later than usual. Streets glitter with grit. Palms clack like playing cards. At the condo path, he meets Cal coming the other way, collar dark at the throat, clipboard wrapped in plastic. They speak the way men do when they have already moved the furniture out of the low room, short, precise, free of clever. "Bar?" "Lifted wrong," Cal says. "Long shoulder, then no shoulder. Seam right of the outflow, gets mouthy after one body length." "We told the patrol." "Lanterns?" "Cancelled." A note of relief. "Bands inside, teachers still walking the line. I've got 2 students marking intervals till dark. Then it's just whoever hears." "Good," Eduardo says, and lets the word mean a paragraph. They part, Cal inland to fetch radio batteries, Eduardo beachward to do the one thing that never pretends to be more than it is. Look. Sand at the high line holds heat like a pocket. The strand below shows that first shine a storm makes, when the surface polishes itself in patches as if to distract you from where the bottom changed its mind. Far out, a set lifts with a broad back, the kind that tricks a person into calling it beautiful before it feeds a rip with its change. The first mistake of the night is not a scream. It is a bad good idea executed by a little boy and an uncle with a camera. The uncle wants a picture of the kid with his arms up to the sky, storm clouds like a stadium, caption already chosen in his head. Future quarterback. The kid wants to be tall. He steps onto the first plate of wet. It behaves. Rule learned, water cooperates. He steps again. Rule breaks. Stop, Eduardo says. Not loud, not soft, just the weight you put on a rung before you commit to climbing. The uncle looks, expecting scold and a lecture he means to ignore. He sees neither. He sees a man with a pencil behind his ear and a hand held up at about wave height, the way surf instructors do when they teach smaller bodies how to read breath. Right there, Eduardo says to the boy. Good, don't turn. He keeps the hand up. He drops it 2 inches, a slow metronome. Right foot, 1 shoe, whole foot, no toe tests. He has learned that the words whole foot produce better steps than step. The boy follows. The floor under that shoe behaves because the sea, engaged in tougher tasks 10 yards out, appreciates a human using correct form. The uncle starts toward them because that is what uncles do when embarrassment and love collide. Eduardo shifts left and says, "High line, sir," with a courtesy that is also a fence. Cal appears. How do men appear at the right second? With 2 students and a throw bag. They do not make a stage. They make a shape around the mistake that lets it shrink without losing important information. The students lay the line parallel to the wet, not a rescue yet, a ruler. Wind lifts more sand. The bell at the mouth misses a sentence and then speaks 3 in a row, apologizing. The storm pushes 1 shoulder through the seam, and all the water's older arguments wake, the ones about pull and release and what counts as fair. Eduardo keeps his palm level till the boy's weight is back on sand that remembers heat. He lowers his hand. The boy breathes and does good math. Hurt later, shame now, life always. He tucks into the uncle's shirt chest first, a small animal choosing den over display. "Gracias," the uncle says. And then, "Thank you." And then I know better, because people who love children owe the sea a sentence on nights like this. Eduardo nods once, the way you nod when a ledger balances. Cal students look at him like you look at a tool someone has used 1,000 times and kept sharp. Lightning racks the sky sideways far enough to respect, close enough to keep grown men honest. The wind decides it is tired of asking. Sand rasps underfoot in tiny sideways rivers as grains change addresses. Patrol lights down at the jetty do long, polite sweeps without drama. One of the teachers, thin, determined, raincoat cinched like a thesis, walks the high line telling anyone who will listen the 4 sentences that have started to live in this town like a creed. Low tide does not mean safe. The bar moves. Count your steps. Listen when the water asks. In the middle of this, the second mistake is older and quieter. A man of 50 with the gait of someone who used to be faster and can't forgive it. He has the walk you see on a reunion field, shoulders back, memory forward. He wants to feel the old line of power in his calves, the good burn just before too late. He picks the wrong mirror to stride on. The floor snatches at his ankle like a friend insisting on a private word. Eduardo does not move toward him. He has learned where he belongs on different nights, and on storm nights, his post is the place where messages turn into motion. He raises his hand where the water can see it. The man glances left. Why left? Habit. Memory. Men always check the past before they check the ground. He sees Eduardo's hand, and his body remembers the simplest form of surrender: copy. He matches the drop, matches the slide. The storm, busy with its real work, allows the moment to stay private. Then the third thing, not mistake exactly, test exactly, the bottle, not the same bottle. Bottles do not reincarnate, but a cousin, a green cylinder with a cork that isn't sure if it belongs to this mouth, comes beetling along the runnel like an object that wants desperately to join the main conversation. It bumps his ankle and stops right between him and the man and the two students who are now sweeping the throw bag into an arc that makes sense for this new shape of floor. Eduardo picks it up. He is annoyed for half a second, the way men get annoyed when the universe insists on metaphors while the practical part of the problem needs attention. He holds it to the wind like a man checking rain by sticking a hand out from a porch. Foam lines crabbed by chop attempt letterwork beyond their station. A butchered L, a cross that could be T or F, depending on how strictly you grade, an O that keeps losing its back in the pull. He laughs once because the C, even at its most grown-up, still wants to show him handwriting. "Later," he says. "Your student can draw after class." He sets the bottle on the sand behind him, where it won't make anyone greedy for story. He points with the non-bottle hand and uses Rosa's tone when a brush bucked. Calm, inexorable. "You already did the hardest part," he tells the man. "Now we copy it for 3 heartbeats. Don't pay attention to the bargainers." The bargainers are the little pools ready to offer a magic stepping stone that will instead leverage his hip into a story doctors tell each other at conferences. The man copies, and for a moment the storm approves again, lightning scribbling in the background like an expert correcting form in the margins. A squall comes in, thin rain like needles, wind up 2 clicks, sound dropping a ceiling over the whole scene. The patrol calls from the jetty that they're closing the outer rocks. Cal answers that the seam is behaving like a liar who wants a relationship. We believe you, and we don't. The teacher turns her class of 3 into a moving sign, walking the high line, repeating the 4 sentences, the 4th, louder, each pass. Listen when the water asks. The bottle rolls back to Eduardo's heel. He nudges it farther inland with the blunt toe of his shoe. He knows you cannot hand someone surrender. You can only reduce the amount of theatre in the task until surrender feels like good engineering. The man reaches good ground, and because he is 50 and used to hiding, disguises relief as anger at himself. Eduardo spares him that extra weight. "You did fine," he says, meaning. "You did not make yourself the hero of a story that required a smaller part." The man nods as if permission has been granted to be merely living. A crack out past the bell, closer thunder with a voice in it, folds the beach in half. Someone screams once and stops because the sound embarrassed her mouth. The wind changes key again. The storm shows the town its ledger and points with a damp finger. Who listened? Who stepped back? Who will learn better next time because the sea stayed kind? Eduardo lifts both hands to no one and everyone and draws the big even arc that means we are done here, the way a conductor signals the last measure. The patrol, seeing the same line from across the bar, completes their sweep and drives inland 2 streets to escort people who have mistaken a view for victory. Rain commits. It comes straight down, orderly, the way a good downpour does when it means to give streets the thorough wash they deserve. Foam writing ceases. In this kind of rain, water doesn't perform, it works. Eduardo picks up the bottle because leaving trash is a sin his hands refuse to learn. He is curious in a human way, but disciplined in the better one. He does not open it. Not tonight, not in weather. He slips it under his arm the way you carry a blueprint when you are not ready to reveal the plan. Cal catches up to him under the stare of the closed snack bar, both men spattered, both wearing that expression you see on faces after a baby is born or a house doesn't burn. Something chose our side for an hour. They look at the bottle and at each other and at the line where the water has decided to do tomorrow's work now. Cal says, "You going to keep it?" Eduardo answers, "I'm going to give it back in the morning if it still wants to go." Cal grins. "Students will ask what was inside." Eduardo shrugs. The point of a letter isn't always the paper. A gust booms around the corner like a truck in a tunnel. The bell forgets itself, then remembers, then decides to let rain talk. They part, small salute, same porch. Eduardo walks the high path home, bottle tucked, quadriceps tired in the good way. In his kitchen he sets it on a towel. He does not touch the cork. He pours a glass of water like a man who has earned the right to stop arguing with liquids for a night. He sleeps with the window cracked to let the storm make dignified noise. Morning is all apology. Clouds in polite stacks. Streets with that rinsed smell belonging to clean engines and leaves. The Gulf looking like it sat all night with a cold cloth. Eduardo carries the bottle to the edge at a civilized hour when only dog people and workers in shirts with names stitched on them are out. He sets it at the mirror line and says, "All right." And the next wash lifts and takes it, not theatrically, not as an omen, just as a thing that needed to continue elsewhere. He watches it become a problem for pelicans to ignore. He writes, "Thank you" in the wet, and the sea edits it immediately. No lingering. That quick erase feels correct. The town wakes. Cal's students bring their sticks and remeasure intervals. The teacher, who turned 3 teens into a moving sign, walks by with coffee and says, "You'd make a good librarian," which might be the highest praise in their shared dialect. Eduardo puts his pencil behind his ear, like a man clocking in to a job no one pays for, and that is somehow better that way. The storm has taken what it wanted and left what it had to, including a town slightly taller by a hair, a seam that learned manners for one more day, and an old sign painter whose grip is a little looser on everything except the line where he stands to watch the water right. Years do the neat work Rosa admired, rounding, easing, sanding sharp to smooth. They also do the untidy work she knew just as well, loosening fittings, shuffling sand, making strangers of shores that thought they were permanent. Eduardo lets both kinds happen at their preferred speed. He keeps walking, he keeps reading foam, he keeps a pencil in his pocket. He mostly keeps his mouth shut, unless a sentence would materially improve the next 10 seconds of a stranger's life. The town grows a skin of new paint over old wood. The bait shop becomes a cafe and then a bait shop again when the cafe's owner discovers tourists don't buy coffee at dawn in storm season. The patrol truck changes shape and color and never its job. Cal's program at the college goes from 2 sections to 4. Students carry clipboards and good attitudes. They say, "seem like a word that can be graded on a rubric," and then some of them graduate into the version you cannot grade, the one that lives in your ankles and tells you what not to step on. Eduardo wonders sometimes if that long night with the bottle and the storm will get turned into something it wasn't. Rescue myth, local legend, branded beer. It doesn't. The town absorbs it the way sand absorbs a high tide's brag, keeping only what helps the next stranger behave. The only artifact is a small laminated card Cal tapes inside the first aid door at the snack bar and inside the patrol truck and on the corkboard in the college shop. 4 lines, black on white, set in the plainest face Eduardo ever lettered. Low tide, safe. The bar moves. Count your steps. Listen when the water asks. He doesn't sign it. The sea signed it first. The bottle returns once, years later, or rather a bottle returns. There is no sense making a religion out of glass. A kid finds it. The cork is stubborn. The mother opens it with a dish towel and a twist. Inside, a sun-wrinkled receipt from a marina 2 towns over and a child's drawing of a fish with square teeth. The kid treats it like treasure and is correct. Eduardo admires the teeth. Square letters always were his favorite. He says nothing about ghosts. He likes that the town's hauntings now prefer good instructions to good stories. He paints less on wood and more on air. He still has a few paying jobs, old boat transoms that deserve their names grazed back into existence, a church board that wants no parking to be a mercy instead of a threat. He goes slow on purpose. His wrists remember how letter widths relate to line length. The body keeps good dictionaries. When he's done, he wipes his hands on a rag that started life as a T-shirt with one of his best signs on it. That feels like right recycling. One fall, the university sends a researcher with an expensive camera and a very gentle way of asking questions. She's writing about coastal ritual, objects that become shrines without anyone naming them. She has a list, and the lifeguard stand is on it. She asks Eduardo if he believes in ghosts. He looks at the seam and says, "I believe in maintenance." She waits. He adds, "Sometimes maintenance looks like manners." She smiles as if handed a line she can quote without embarrassing the person who said it. He walks with her to the stand. He points at the angle from the high line and says, "If you're going to take one picture, take it from here. It won't show you anything a camera knows how to print. That is the point." She nods and does it anyway. Later, when she shows him the shot on her screen, the photo looks like an ordinary chair against an ordinary sea. She looks disappointed, and then not. "Sometimes the failure is the data," she says happily. He likes scientists who enjoy being humbled by their subject. On the first lantern night after Conti dies, the town does not pronounce the word memorial. It just leaves his folding chair by the post, and no one sits in it, and no one says why, and the effect is better than a plaque. Children file past with carp and minnows on sticks, LEDs pretending fire for the oldest part of the brain. The band plays one song softer. Nora, older now, steady, touches the chair back with 2 fingers the way you touch the doorframe of a house you once lived in. Eduardo stands at the high line and files the picture in the drawer where he keeps useful images. Grief has long since stopped making theatre on his account. It makes schedules now, oil the hinges, charge the radio, teach the sentence to whoever missed it the first time. Cal's brisk students have become brisk adults. One of them, the pale girl who could point at the seam with her eyes closed, runs an emergency training outfit that teaches harbours how to keep humility in stock. She sends Eduardo a brochure with a photo of the beach and a caption that reads, "Where the bottom changes its mind." He writes her back a postcard, hand-lettered, because printers are for the statements you want to forget. And he signs it with a flourish Rosa would have admired and mocked in equal measure. The kitchen cabinet still has Rosa inside, small black letters on the bare wood. He opens the door sometimes when he isn't looking for anything, a tiny liturgy of maintenance. He says, "Hey" to the room the way a man greets a spouse who is in another part of the house doing not much. He doesn't stop missing her. Missing becomes a bench in a hallway, somewhere you can sit to tie a shoe without calling attention to yourself. Another storm night arrives years after the first, with its own personality, less noise, more insistence. The town is better at itself now. People go high sooner. Signs don't get peeled off by managers bent on aesthetics. The bar tries one trick and gives up, like an older dog asked to perform for strangers. Eduardo walks the line with a new habit. He carries a stub of chalk in his pocket and, when needed, kneels and writes a single arrow on the firm sand pointing the way out instead of in. Water will take the arrow in a minute. A minute is long enough for a human to feel seen. He keeps the marble on his desk until one day it is gone. He assumes it rolled, then assumes it was borrowed by a child without language for borrowing, then assumes it completed its small orbit. He doesn't look for it. Things that want to go, go. The space it leaves makes room for a pencil sharpener, which is a fair trade. He and Cal have the same conversation every spring at the bait shop that is sometimes a cafe. They stand by the cooler and talk about nothing until the talk rounds the corner to the 4 lines. Has anyone tried to add a 5th? Not yet. Will they? Probably. Will we peel it? If it's pretty and wrong, they grin. It is good to have a friend who shares your allergy to unnecessary flourish. Some evenings, Eduardo brings a brush down to the wet and writes, "Thank you," and then writes "gracious" underneath like a translation, and the sea edits both in equal time. Some evenings he writes nothing and lets the foam handle handwriting class alone. Once, on a day that had gone badly for no good reason, he writes home in the cleanest strokes he knows how to make. The wash hesitates a second longer than usual before taking it. He considers that a conversation and does not overthink it. He never opened the storm bottle. He watched the sea reclaim it and felt better for not insisting on proof. On his 65th birthday, he tells Nora that he thinks the point of some messages is that they pass through you, not to you. She says, "Like wind through screens." And he says, "Exactly." And for 2 minutes, they look like a mid-century advertisement for contentment. 2 ordinary people agreeing about maintenance. On a perfect morning, the kind postcards insist upon, a new family arrives at the high path. Parents bright with decisions, a girl with a book, a boy with a kite. The father asks the local standing there, Eduardo, because he has made himself into a kind of fixture. "Where's safe to walk?" Eduardo smiles like a man who gets to give the useful answer again. He points without drama and gives the 4 lines the town has learned to recite without the hush of religion. The father thanks him in the voice of someone who just found out the soup came with bread. The boy's kite goes up. The girl's book stays open. The mother's shoulders drop the way shoulders drop when a stranger's sentence does the work she didn't want to make her voice do. He takes his walk. Foam scribbles, then steadies. Pelicans arrow low like punctuation. Commas written by muscle memory. The bell sentences the air on schedule. An old clerk back from a long lunch and up for a good afternoon. At the mirror line he writes, "Thank you" one more time, and, because the hand sometimes knows before the mind, adds for letting her go in smaller letters underneath. The sea edits the second line first, then the first. In the order things ought to be remembered. He stands until the double in the wet disappears and the world stops mirroring and goes back to being one of itself. He turns inland along the high line where the sand remembers the day's heat. As he passes the path, he tucks a small, plain card into the bulletin frame, a sign with no border set in the square, humble letters he taught his wrists decades ago. If you feel invited, count your steps. If you feel proof, check it gently. If you feel seen, say thank you. No signature. People will assume the sea wrote it. At home, he oils the door hinge that has been requesting grace for a week. He opens the kitchen cabinet and taps the wood beside Rosa once, and the knock sounds like a bell if bells could exist in wood. He pours water. He opens the window. He sits with the radio low while the weatherman reads "Caution" like prayer, and then laughs at his own joke about golf. Eduardo laughs too, because kindness makes room for foolishness, and that is part of why towns survive storms. Night puts its hand on the room. The gulf resumes its ordinary voice, which has become his favorite sound, and perhaps the kindest miracle in the whole arrangement. He sleeps without incident. In the morning, he will walk again, not to be haunted, but to be kept. The C will try an L, then a T, then perhaps nothing at all, and he will approve the drafts in the same way he approved his own. Small corrections, steady strokes, enough. That's it. If you want more of these, tap subscribe. New stories roll in nightly. Sleep well. Or at least, sleep honest.